one image that everybody agreed on was not interpretive. It's the one that is so obviously mechanical. And that's the one that they said, oh, that's interesting. It wasn't, oh my God, jumping up and down. It was, oh, that, because it's going to be like moving, through, frozen molasses.
Is it that ripped up plate with the spring and the bolt?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, that's incontrovertible.
And that's the only one. The only one they all agreed on was a thing. But see, then they're stopped because that thing is in a place where a thing like that can't be. So you wind up with the Robbie syndrome. Remember Forbidden Planet? When they aimed the blaster at the robot and he goes into this circuit overload? That's what happens to people. Because you met them, it's the irresistible force meeting the removable object. And Chris put his finger on it the other day. The biggest problem is when you tell them where this junk is. And then they wind up spinning their wheels internally because it can't be. Everything they've ever been taught, it cannot be. Because based on what I'm seeing this afternoon, we're all looking at the elephant from a different perspective. Well, it's my task, I guess, to do a kind of a big picture overview. And what I want to do is give people some historical perspective. I mean, we are not here by accident. The people who are part of the crew, the bridge crew, are not here by accident. And the torturous 30, 40 plus year road to get here is interesting in terms of context and background. Basically, what we're doing this afternoon and evening is manifesting what Carl Sagan said in Cosmic Connection in 1973. Intelligent life on Earth first manifests itself in the geometric regularity of its constructions. I mean, when you think about it, if you're looking at an alien planet or looking down at Earth, how do you know anybody's home? The only way, the only criteria is regular geometry. If you don't have any spectroscopic data, you don't see lights, you don't see signals, don't see blinking Morse code, the only way you're going to tell, either with a current technological civilization or an ancient ruined one, is if they built in geometric structures and geometric regularity. Now that holds true for humans, but does it hold true for anybody else? We don't know. That's part of what this journey is all about. Because we do have at least two astonishing places, one very close and one kind of reasonably close, the Moon and Mars, where we're seeing amazing geometric regularity at all kinds of different scales. I mean, Carl would be so thrilled if he was with us now. Anyway, I'm going to move very fast because you can go back and listen to the tapes again and again. And I would recommend you do this at least once or twice because some of these slides, you're going to want to pause and look at them. I mean, really look at them. And that's the advantage of being a member of Club 19.5. Sagan's dictum about geometry came about in 1960 when the U.S. launched the first television satellite. This was Tyros 1, and it was the first weather satellite that broadcast down live TV from space. And Carl raised the question on those first primitive Tyros TV scans. You can see the scan lines. I mean, look at how primitive this picture is. Was there any indication of intelligent life down here on the planet? And he picked that criteria of geometry. Now, this picture is from Tyros 5. It was taken a couple years after the first satellite. And this is taken a little south of San Diego. Look at that geometry. In fact, I can show you the geometry because this little thingy has a laser. So let me show you this geometry. This is what was so intriguing to me. Look at that stunning right angle. Then look at these other parallel lines to the right angle, give or take. Look at this parallel line. Look at this line, and then that right angle. So these, by the way, are aircraft contrails. When NASA put this picture up and released it, these, by the way, are resume marks in the spacecraft on the TV camera, an image orthicon, as are these. and this one, and this one. But this geometry is on the planet. It's not aircraft contrails, and NASA never mentioned this stunningly interesting geometry. They only mentioned the jet contrails. Now, we fast forward the film. This is Houston from the International Space Station in 2005 at night. The reason I picked this is not because of all the lights, but because at night, the signal to noise ratio, which is a very important criteria, you can sometimes see geometry really, really simple, like here. Other times in the daytime, it's lost because of color, of clouds, of contrast, all that. So I picked this shot and we're just going to zoom in. Look at all this stunning regular geometry. Any geometrician, is that a word? Well, maybe it is now. An alien looking at Earth would look down and they would say, there's somebody home, even if it wasn't lit. If this was just daytime and you saw this geometry, somebody would be home. Here's another shot from Dubai, from ISIS, taken a few months ago in 2018. This is a kingdom, as you know, which is doing astonishing things economically and architecturally. Look at this amazing geometry. They have created geoglyphs like this one. And they've actually got up the coastline here. They've got a whole representation of the world, which I couldn't find easily. But look at this geometry. If you look down from orbit and saw this, you would say somebody intelligent was there. Now, this is El Atan in Israel, circa about 3000 BC. This is a tell. This is a huge mound which has been lived on and lived on and lived on for thousands of years. This is an excavation. What tells us it's an excavation? Well, it has right angle geometry. And when we go closer, this is looking down vertically. This, I think, is from a drone. Drones are so great for archaeology now because you can do all the way from space, all the way down just a few feet, hovering in a drone, taking pictures. Look at all this wonderful, stunning, regular geometry. 3,000-year-old geometry. Now, look at this stuff. These don't look regular. They look like boulders. How do we know they're part of something intelligent? Because they're lined up in neat rows. So part of the criteria for how you look at these kinds of images, even if these are regular shaped stones, blocks, obviously all the same size, roughly, right angles, nice corners. Remember, this thing has been buried, so it's been protected from erosion for thousands of years. These guys are not regular. How do we know they're part of an intelligent complex? Because the irregular stuff is laid out in regular geometry. Remember back during the Bill Clinton, George Bush election, when it was Clinton's campaign manager who said it's the economy stupid? Well, if you want to boil down what we're doing this afternoon and evening, it's the geometry. It's the geometry stupid. You look for geometry, and that's your criteria for is it real or is it natural? Is it artificial or is it part of nature? Now, this is something interesting. This is an artifact now on a tiny, tiny, tiny scale found a little while ago from 36,000 BC. It's a flake of flint. You can see 1 centimeter, it's a couple, 3, maybe 4 inches across. All right. Now we zoom in. Look at these scratches. The big question was, are the scratches natural or are they artificial? Were they deliberately made? And this is a Neanderthal flint, which means if they were artificially made, then Neanderthals had a brain. They had the idea of symbolism, of communication. Whoever did this was trying to do something. And was it just a kind of a slapdash? Well, what they've done is they've used a microscope and they've actually gone in and found which grooves made by a sharp tool overlie which other grooves. And there's a sequence. There's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And then you go back. Then there's 6 and 7 and 8 is way over here. And then there's 9 and there's 10, etc. There's 11. They go back. So this was not done just randomly. This was done with order and thinking. And the big question, of course, is what was the meaning? What was the purpose? Now we're going to switch gears. This is an actual image taken by the U.S. Navy in 1947 out the window of an airplane that Admiral Byrd was flying in, a DC-3, in the Operation High Jump, really incredibly, remarkably weird polar expedition. 13 ships, 4,000 men, etc., right after World War II. We won't get into why they went down there and all that, but this was just a piece of film. It's called The Secret Land. And it shot out the window, and I grabbed it off, Turner Movie Classics, as they ran this one night. And I brought it into the computer, and I started doing a little work. First of all, I put it back to natural color because the film had faded. I mean, this is all supposed to be snow-covered stuff, right? But what I'm seeing is geometry. In fact, the more you enlarge and tweak the color and contrast, the more you see regular geometry. This, in fact, looks like a ruin on the top of a mountain, very large, which has caved in. The snow is, been blown away, and you can look into the interior. Look at these regular geometric lattices and the right angles and the parallel lines. So again, this is someplace right on Earth. You can now probably find this on Google Maps if we take the time and go figure out where the plane was when we took the picture. And so you can ultimately come to a conclusion. Was there somebody, a high-tech civilization at the South Pole, completely independent of all our discussion of all the notables that have suddenly wound up at the South Pole? Well, what does this have to do with our Mars investigations and moon and all that? Because our first indication, our first hint that life, intelligent life on someplace other than Earth might be on Mars came from this place. This is Mars Hill in Flagstaff, Arizona. And this is an observatory specifically built by Percival Lowell in the previous century, the 19th century, to look at this object up here hiding behind a pine tree. This is Mars during the opposition of 2003. This is Lowell himself, and this is what he drew using a telescope I'm going to show you very shortly. What do you see all over the surface of Mars, a la this citizen scientist? Because he wasn't trained in the sciences. He was an incredibly wealthy businessman. He was like an Elon Musk. And he turned to astronomy, and he turned to Mars, and he changed the world by using this telescope. This is another view at night of the Alvin Clark 24-inch refractor. Here's a close-up of the dome slit looking at Mars. And this is what he created. This is Lowell himself using this telescope, incredibly famous telescope. Probably one of the most important telescopes on Earth, given what it was used to do. And this is one of his Mercator maps of Mars in the 1880s, 1890s, the early teens of the 20th century. And what do we see all over the surface of Mars, a la Lowell's visual observations? We see geometry. And this was the whole basis of his assertion that Mars was home to intelligent inhabitants. This is now a gorgeous view of this telescope inside the dome. It's all real wood. It's like going into a cathedral or a temple. This is the business end of the telescope. And the reason I'm showing you all this is because in 2003, Robin and I had the most amazing adventure. I got to use, and she got to look through, Percival Lowell's original 24-inch telescope, which started the whole Canals on Mars escapade. Except we did more than just look. We used a high-tech television system. And this, for the first time anybody's ever seen this, this is an actual picture I took of Mars during the opposition of 2003, when Mars was closer than it had been for 60,000 years, a little over 34 million miles away. And as you can see, you can't see very much, all right? Now, Lowell, sitting there for month after month and year after year, this is one of his maps showing the same region. All right, let me go back and you can see. Now, it's tilted differently because, of course, Mars is tilted about 25 degrees, like the Earth is 23 and a half. So different seasons on Mars will tip the polar ice caps toward you or away from you. This is a polar ice cap on the South Pole. It's not water ice, we now know. It's CO2. but it's a polar ice cap. So this is from the U.S. Air Force, which made maps before the Mariner 4 mission in 1964 to go to Mars. And this region in particular is I'm kind of fond of it because it's Cydonia, as seen on a Lowell map. Now, we would never have known that anything interesting was in Cydonia except for these few faint lines, which when the first spacecraft went there, they apparently went away. This is a Bonstell painting of what we thought we would see: straight canals, waterways stretching out across the Martian deserts. The Lowell mythos, the Lowell paradigm was that these were irrigation ditches. Here's another artist, a guy named Buddy, showing, among other things, an ancient crystal city of Mars. The projections of our imaginations in the early parts of the last couple of centuries ran wild with the ideas. But in 1976, the Viking mission landed on Mars with this. This is the lander inside its aeroshell. This is the orbiter. 2 spacecraft, 2 orbiters, 2 landers, 4 in total. And it was on those images from Viking in 1976 that we first saw this. This is raw data from the spacecraft. And this suddenly co-opted the world because it was a face on Mars in Cydonia. This is an improved version, enhanced. We can see interesting features, the symmetry, teeth in the mouth. I mean, this huge furor over, is it real or is it a trick of light and shadow and all that? Well, this went around the world and all kinds of people got into the act, including cartoonists. This is kind of cute. Mars. He's looking at Mars. He sees the face on Mars. Well, my gosh, the face on Mars looks to be a kitty cat. And he says to his companion, well, we see it. And that will become more relevant as we move through the evening. So this is NASA Viking frame 35A72. There's the raw face. We're going to move very quickly here because in addition to the face on Mars, around it, there appeared to be, here's the word again, geometric objects. This is called the D&M pyramid. Turned out to have stunningly regular internal geometry. And one of our panelists this morning, Bob Harrison, is going to talk to you at great length about the geometry of the D&M. Anyway, I found, using this geometry, that the same geometry replicated all over the Cydonia complex, with the face sitting right in the middle. A geometry that was redundant, a geometry that was meaningful, because this geometry all resolved down to a series of fundamental mathematical, trigonometric, geometric constants. And at this point, of course, it's like, how much do you put together before you say, it's got to be real? It can't be an illusion. This is an ICOS image of Mars taken during that opposition in 2003. You can't really see very much. It's so far away. It's so distant. You need spacecraft to go. You need spacecraft to go into orbit, to look down with high, incredible resolution imagery. And better yet, you need spacecraft that land on the planet, which of course we've now had 20, 30 years of this. I'll leave you with this before I turn this back to Cynthia. This is a set of twisted metal that we found on Mars and on Earth. Do you know? Can you tell which is which? One does not belong. It's on another planet where all the NASA people say nothing is alive, no one's ever lived, it's nothing but a dry and dusty desert. And yet, we have one of these images is from Mars, and it shows artificial, geometric, twisted manufactured metal. How do we resolve that? Cynthia, back to you.
Richard has just been going over the really basic elements that we use when we're looking at the photos. So the location is so important. You know, they always say location, location, location. So when we're looking at an anomaly, we also look to see, well, what's around it? Are there supporting other anomalies that make this one more likely to be artificial? Richard went in great depth about the structural geometry. Again, the context with the location, the geometry, the coloring, the repetition of patterns is really important. And coloration, it gives you an idea of what the element is that we're seeing, what is the substance it's made of. And we'll be addressing how NASA has used coloration as a means to hide many of those anomalies. Another thing that one might not think of is the shadows. Shadows give you an indication of the shape that's casting it. And actually, shadows were very instrumental in helping me to sculpt the face on Mars the first time, because there were two different photos. And actually what I was sculpting was the shadows. It was the shadows. That's how I would check it to see, does it match? I'd line up the sun angle, and then I'd check the shadows. And it gave an indication of the height of the different areas. And size, of course, is another factor. Is it really large? Then it could be a ship or a temple or a fortress. Or is it really small? It could be a room or a car. So just keep in mind these different elements as we're going through, as the different presenters are going through their presentations. You're going to see how these different elements are referred to repeatedly. And I guess I would have added another one here, which has to do with artistry, in the sense that humanoids have an imagination and they create art, which can be very subjective, but also very evocative. And when we look throughout our history, we see that art is an expression of that consciousness. All right, I'm excited to introduce who our presenters will be. In this workshop, we have Richard C. Hoagland, Keith Laney, Robert Harrison, myself, Cynthia, Will Farrar, Andrew Curry, Tim Saunders, and Keith Morgan. Tim Saunders, website, tsyd.com. Tim Saunders is a British national who grew up near the south coast of the United Kingdom. Positively influenced by the nearby yachting and shipping scene, he chose his ideal path at the age of 10 when he decided to become a yacht designer. He studied industrial design at the coveted Coventry University and is fortunate to have been chosen by many of the world's highly revered yacht design studios to work on an array of live projects of different sizes, styles, and uses during what he affectionately calls his apprenticeship years. In 1999, Tim established his independent design studio and rapidly became involved in originating a new generation of super and mega yachts, ranging in size from 10 to 275 meters, that is 30 to 575 feet, which gained increasing positive notoriety while exhibiting his work at the Monaco Yacht Show and other prestigious venues. Tim will see the launch of a 90-meter mega yacht and a 50-meter super sail yacht later this year, and he says, "It's very rewarding to breathe life into these innovative projects, which are ultimately positive reflections of each satisfied owner." Tim Saunders, Yacht Design Ltd., continues to evolve and develop multiple iconic custom super and mega yacht projects for local and international clients.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm speaking to you from tonight from southwest Turkey. So for me, it's 2:30 a.m. So if you excuse a few sort of night owl noises and things like that, then you'll know what's going on at this end. I've kind of scripted the beginning just to lay down a few points that I wanted to make. And as we sort of go into the various slides and then going into 2D and 3D applications, we can sort of get more interactive. So from my bio, you'll have realized already that I'm a full-time yacht designer, and I'm therefore well-versed in filling blank sheets of paper with sketches that reflect my imagination and my knowledge of yacht building. Then evolve them through geometry, design, and naval architecture to sort of perfectly suit each client hand in glove, then manage them through build to eventual launch. In the case of studying the numerous artifacts, archeologies, and anomalies we are finding in photographs off-world, I used many of the same skills. However, I've set out from the very start to resist from filling in any blanks with artistic license where possible. So my aim from the beginning is to stay as factual as possible and to extract real data from official sources as far as possible. So I've developed a series of workflows to extract reliable data from official photos and 3D information from NASA, ESA, and other official space agencies, not to mention the sterling work that many other members of the imaging team have conducted and innovated for many, many years. My aim is to format and reverse engineer the information to recreate selected scenes using age-old geometry and state-of-the-art 3D software with a view to intensify the signal from the noise and therefore gain more understanding. Think of this workflow as a slightly more complex version of using Pythagoras' theorem to obtain missing information from any given triangle. I'm now going to take you through my workflow with a view to show you some of my techniques and the milestones I feel are necessary to generate reliable results. So first up, I've chosen this particular archeology, anomaly, artifact. If you look in this area here, I guess you can just about see my cursor. There's a black dot. Now, what we have is 3 official sightings of this by the Mars Curiosity rover, Sol 51 and Sol 64. And this image has been taken by the Mars cam, and so we know which lens has been used. We know we have more than one view. We know that we have 2 viewpoints from the same object. We also have different lighting conditions for the same object as well. So what's interesting, if we could zoom in a little bit further, and I can also just zoom in, you can just about see this guy here. And to me, it just stood out. It doesn't look very much like a rock to me. It looks like it has a central axis. It looks symmetrical around that axis. And it, strangely enough, has this sort of very geometric looking pipe protruding out the front. So when we zoom in to a different source, the same photograph, it's just a different source. I think Sol 64, this particular photograph, shows the best quality. And so the first thing I do is to import that into my 2D CAD program. This is a screenshot from it. I'll now just open up into that program itself. And we can see that the first job to do is to bring in the image. You can see the image is separate. And then to trace lines around the pixels. Now, obviously, the closer you look, the more pixelated the image becomes. However, this is the best image we can find. And I've taken that image through Photoshop in order to sharpen a little, but there's a danger also if you sharpen too much, then the algorithms can actually start to create different shapes than the originals. So I tend to prefer to leave the images as basic as possible, as unchanged as possible. So in this case, what I've done is I've taken this axis through the center line here. Obviously, this object is tilted over on one side. And you can see that the original, if we go back just 1 second to here, you can see that the object is also rotated slightly. What I've done initially is to trace around and just place the pipe on the center line here. And you'll see why in a second. What I've done is projected the geometry up to a series of plan views, each line, I don't know how well you can see that, but each line going up to strike the tangentially, each circle that defines the shape. I've also worked on a number of different pipe dimensions in order to see, as you rotate them, which one is the most likely size to correspond with the rest of the proportions from the image. From this kind of complicated plan view, I'm then able to bring this image up to a simple front elevation. And just to make sure, there's the same plan view again here, which you can see is now becoming far more of a simplified CAD drawing, outline drawing. So I'll skip now to the next point. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that I use Vectorworks here. Vectorworks is a 2D CAD program. It's also a 3D CAD program. It's my preferred application because it's vector-based. That means that each curve stays good. Each curve stays in perfect geometry, no matter how much you scale it, large or smaller. A lot of CAD systems, when you scale lines, they tend to deteriorate or they become pixelated or faceted. But this is Vectorworks, so it stays absolutely as pure information. Now, when I take this on to the next step, and you'll see here, I'm now going to import it into a 3D program. So what I've actually done is I've used my preferred 2D program to create a template or a series of templates. So I now have the front view, I have the top view, and I have the outlines for the rocks and things. So I'll now import that into a 3D program, which my preferred one is Rhino. And so there is the same view exactly you've just seen. So this is the front elevation. Now we're going to start to create these surfaces. So now we're into a 3-dimensional environment. So what I think is absolutely amazing about this artifact is that it really is symmetrical about its central axis. So when we start to create the surfaces, and I'll just do one or two now just to give you an impression of how that happens. Let's just click on a circle to this point here. And I've made this rather easy for myself right now because I've already put the points so the computer knows where I'm going to start and stop every curve, which is defined in Rhinoceros. So I'm just making a series of curves like this, which go from the center axis to the outlines. So I can go on, but I've prepared one earlier, so I'll just give you an impression of how it works, and then we can move on to the next step because we're going to be short of time. So what we can do is now select two of these curves, and we can loft the surface. There it is. And then I'm going to select the next two curves, which are these two. We'll do the same again. And we'll do the same again. And this is why I chose this object for this particular image analysis workshop, because it's just so easy to create surface, because we have symmetry, we have more than one view, so we can understand the shape from different viewpoints, and therefore we can see it is symmetrical, and it is cylindrical, and it does have a central axis. So, you know, I've never seen a rock like this before, personally, especially one with a pipe protruding out the front of it. So to make the top, we need to make a planar curve. So now you can see we start to have the top hat of this surface. And now we can move further forward. So there's the same geometry. Thank you. I need to speed up then. So there we go. Now we're going to put in the rest of the 3D surfaces. And I'm just going to come up here. And now we start to say, well, does it really look like this? I guess it does, because the photographs say it does. The geometry says it does. The axis says it does. The symmetry says it does. And how does that work in reality? Well, what we can do is to put it back into the scene. And we can even create, let's say, a different environmental map, for example. Now it's going to be shiny. And now that could be the end of the story, but of course it's not quite the end of the story, because what we need to do is the vital test, which is to reorient the same model in more than one photograph to prove that I'm not just making this up as a piece of artistic creation. What I'm actually going to do now is to show the same model in the two different photographs. And this is Sol 64. This is Sol 51. And what you can see, I'll just zoom in here, is if I take away if I put it back to wireframe, you can see absolutely that the 3D model is pretty close to the original photograph. And the same model, which I've not tampered with, which I've just simply orientated in a different direction upon its axis. If I do the same thing again, and this is okay, the photograph is not quite as good quality, but still, if you zoom in, you can just about see the geometry of the pipe sticking at the front. You can see the corners and so on of the edge. And I think that that's quite a remarkable match for one surface in two different photographs taken by the same rover on 2 different days. So that's created the 3D model. Now I'm going to go back. So the question is now, well, what could it be? It doesn't look like a rock to me. It could be a rock, but I suspect it's probably something which has been made by some intelligence more than natural rock formation or erosion. So is it part of a rover that fell off? Is it part of a wheel hub? Well, it could be. Is it part of a hydraulic pump? There's some similarities there. These are very terrestrial things that we have on Earth. Is it part of a starter motor from a car? You know, there are certain things that we start to see similarities, like castings, that we see shafts, we see pipes or rotor arms protruding. So, you know, I'm not telling you what the answer is. I don't know. The only way we're going to know is actually by going there, or by sending a rover to have a much closer look. Now, I'm going to speed up very quickly because there's still a number of points I want to get through, if I may. The next point is to take this 3D model into a rendering program. Of course, Rhino, you can do it inside Rhino itself. I prefer to use Keyshot, and I'll show you some more of that later on. So one of the things I wanted to do, again, is not to create a fake environment. So one of the very nice features about Keyshot as an application, Keyshot is a sort of a premier rendering program, is you can import whatever model you've made, whether it's terrain or an object. And then you can give a background, which is a photograph. So in this particular case, this is a photograph that Ron very kindly passed to me. And it's been very carefully colored, in color matched, I should say, and that is what we believe is to be the most natural, true color on Mars when the photograph was taken. So what I did was in Keyshot is I actually used that as a not only an environment, a backdrop to the photograph itself, to the rendering itself, but I also used it to light the scene. So actually, I can use the same photograph 2 times. Firstly, to create the light, which gives Mars light on Mars. And secondly, the same photograph is used to give the backdrop, which obviously lets the hub or the pump, whatever we call this, to look in its natural terrain. Now, rendering is a slow process. This is an excellent program, but even in the scope of what the time we have right now, it's not. There's no point in trying to render in front of your eyes. So I'm just going to give you this as a quick demonstration how you can rotate the model, how you can give it different characteristics. You can give it different metal finishes. You can give it different stone finishes. There's a million things you can do to this to give realistic representations of rendering. Now, I'll come back to this more hopefully in the next image analysis workshop, but I'm just introducing the software right now. So one of the other things I want us to think about on Earth is the atmosphere is made up of mainly nitrogen with a lot of oxygen, of course, but nitrogen is the dominant gas. Now, that way, what we see around us, the way rocks corrode, they break, erode, metals, plastics, and everything else, the way they all break down is to a large extent due to the gases that are in our atmosphere. Now, on Mars, what is really very clear is the most dominant gas is carbon dioxide. So when I was trying to understand which materials to give to this, to render this Mars pump, the Mars hub, I was firstly looking to see what gases were around and then I thought, well, maybe I could find some photographs of some corrosion that have happened on Earth in very rich carbon dioxide environments. And sure enough, it didn't take very long to find this photograph, which is the inside of a carbon dioxide. It's corrosion in a carbon dioxide rich environment, which is the inside of a crude oil pipeline. Now, if you look at this rust here, you may think, okay, that looks familiar. Now, this is also carbon dioxide corrosion. That also looks pretty familiar. I think that's metal. And then we can go on further. And again, this is a pipeline I believe, to do with some form of offshore drilling equipment, the inside of a drilling pipe, which is very rich in carbon dioxide. And again, we can see these colors, which I think look just like we're seeing on Mars. So that all told, I gave a certain type of materials to the rendering program, which is called Keyshot. And ultimately, I ended up with a couple of renderings, just to give you an idea. This is a corroded version. Obviously, it's more neat and tidy than the original because it's a recreation of the scene. And maybe this is how it would have looked when it was new. I don't know how long ago that would have been, but let's just say a few hundred, a few thousand, a few 100,000 years before today. Who knows? Maybe Richard can tell us later. Okay, so I'm running a little bit over time, I know, but there's something I really want to show you. Some exciting information I came across literally at the weekend. And that is the next project I wish to work on is far more complicated than this one. This one has been relatively easy because we have more than one photograph of the object from different viewpoints. It's a symmetrical shape, and therefore we can recreate the scene without too much difficulty. The next one is far more difficult, and that's going to involve understanding a little bit more about what takes the photographs in the first place. So if we just move to Curiosity rover itself, now this is a model which I have downloaded from, it's a hybrid between something NASA provided and also a gentleman called Ron L. Long, who I have contacted by email. And this is as far as I can see, an fairly accurate representation of the Mars Curiosity rover. Now, the idea by NASA is that you can download this and you can do 3D printing and you can have a scale model on your desk, which is a fantastic idea. Now, what I thought I'd do is to go a little bit further. And when you start examining exactly where the cameras are, that's the green symbol and the red symbol is basically the two positions of the Mars cams. Now, one of them is 100 millimeter focal length. The other one is 34 millimeter focal length. Thank you very much, Keith, for helping me with that. What I've done is I've created a rig. This is work in progress. I've created a rig where I can actually rotate the camera positions. I'm just going to show you. It's not a finished product, but I just want to show you because I'm quite excited about this for hopefully the next workshop. But I can basically rotate the let's just give it an angle for the sake of argument, 15 degrees. Now you can see what has happened is there's the angle of the camera to the ground, therefore enables me to start taking absolute measurements between the distance between the rover and the ground on Mars. So there'll need to be a series of calculations done using the lens, using the distance, the height of the camera, focal length, and so on and so on and so on, which I will get to the bottom of ready for the next workshop. But ultimately, what I want to be able to do is to recreate the next scene, which I'll come to shortly. The next scene is going to make use of the Mars terrain, which is also possible to download from NASA. This is quite amazing. I mean, the scale is huge here. So if we zoom right in here like this, we can imagine that the Curiosity rover is going to be like a little speck on there. But the point is, I think that when I bring all these elements together of the Curiosity rover, the artifact will know when the photograph has been taken. We even have, I'll show you in just a second, a record of how the approach to the object as well. I'm just going to move to the next slide, which is this one. This one is difficult to see right now, but I'm just going to show you this one. This is it's terrain from Mars, which is, several kilometers wide. It's huge up to Curiosity right now, to give you an idea of the scale. But I think the accuracy is quite impressive. So again, when I place Curiosity in the correct place, the artifacts in the correct place, the lighting in the correct place, using the atmospheric colors, using the right materials, using the right atmosphere, and so on, I think we're going to be able to recreate quite accurately how an artifact is actually standing on Mars. And we're hopefully going to be able to learn a lot more, again, using the sort of Pythagoras' theorem. So this is a rendering. This is really very quick and dirty I did. This is using Mars terrain. It's lighting and atmosphere from Mars. So there's nothing artificial here at all, except for the fact that it is created on my laptop. So this is an interesting video where it's showing you a series of snapshots over a 5-year time lapse. Now, this is Sol 926. So often with NASA, they tend to drop off the actual Sol where the interesting objects are, strangely enough. This is the object I want to work on next. This is on Sol 529. So you don't actually see the approach, but we know where it is more or less. And I think when we bring all the ingredients together, I think this is going to be a very interesting artifact to recreate in 3D and to decipher, to see exactly what it is. I'm very interested by this symmetry, which to me looks like a very geometric shape. This doesn't look natural to me. When you get closer and closer, it is incredible the amount of details you find in there, like sort of like engine casing, like 2 layers of metal, like a fixed offset between 2 surfaces around, as if it's some form of fuel tank or reservoir. So hopefully next time round we can look at this in more detail. So I'll rest my case for the time being.
Fabulous. Totally amaze me all the time.
You know, like, remember when John West did his double-blind thing with the guy at Peabody at Harvard? And he showed him the sedimentary bands, and he just put a piece of paper over the head of the Sphinx, and the guy totally agreed that it was water erosion. Then he took the paper away, and the guy freaked out and threw him out of his office because he couldn't stand the idea the Sphinx was not what he'd always thought it was.
Robert Harrison, website CydoniaQuest.com. Bob is a keen investor, and after achieving his dream of financial independence, decided to retire from the rat race in 2010. As a child of the space age, Bob was fascinated by space exploration and speculations about extraterrestrial life from an early age. These have continued to be of interest for him. Dr. Carl Sagan's early speculations about the possibility of artificiality of the Elysium pyramids on Mars have had a long-term impact on his thinking. In June of 2000, Bob began the Cydonia Quest website as a personal exploration of the evidence for very ancient ET ruins in our solar system. To date, the research has mostly concentrated on Mars, and especially Cydonia. The website was inspired by the work of Richard C. Hoagland and his many collaborators in this field. Cydonia Quest is intended to be an additional resource to Hoagland's own popular Enterprise mission website. In it, he explores some of the Enterprise mission's more out-there theories.
Right, in this presentation, I want the objective is to explore the advantages of using a checklist to find ruins in satellite imagery, and in this case specifically ruins on Mars, in Cydonia, and ruins that are archeologies, which are supersized buildings that can house immense populations of towns, cities, that kind of scale. So the first checklist item I use is looking for any signs of geometrical design in the shape or layout of the surface feature we're looking at, and whether a set of features on the surface perhaps are set out in a geometrical pattern. The second item on the checklist is looking for signs of subsidence, which you would expect if something that was basically a building was collapsing. Unfortunately, when large structures collapse and erode and get covered with drifting silt and the like, they become indistinguishable from hills, as we find with pyramids all over the world in the deserts. The third item on the checklist is to look for anything that looks like structural or architectural features. So room size grids, building size grids, massive support walls, or anything that looks like fallen beams. And the fourth item on the checklist is to compare back with things on Earth, so architecture, ruins, archaeological sites, and visual geological analogues on Earth. So I'll move on to the next slide and cover geometry. So the top row here is a low resolution image of the D&M pyramid taken by the Mars 2001 Odyssey. And I'll click forward to that to enlarge it. And what we found is that at this lower resolution, the D&M has this five-sided pentagonal shape, but not a regular one, but it is round a line of symmetry with very similar facets. And you can flip this upside down from right to left. And in this informal geometrical way of looking at it, it will always have this symmetry. A more formal geometrical study is that by Dr. Mark Carlotto, who comes up with apex angles for the facets of 60% and 90% degree and 90 degree. And looking at that diagram, and looking at the true dimensions of the edge of the D&M, I found that the corners all meet at a circumscribing square, and that the center of the facets is the center of the square. And this is another example that can be derived from this geometry of Mark's, which is that the corners, four of the corners are situated a quarter of the length of each length of the square. So if we go back, another example of informal geometry is the D&M pyramid, the face, and the city mounds of Richard Hoagland. Now, when we look at on a larger zoom out, you get the feeling that this should all be fitting inside an equilateral triangle. And in the Hoagland and Torren geometrical model for Cydonia, this is the case that they find. The other thing is that the city mounds themselves seem to, like the D&M pyramid, be arranged in a symmetrical but not entirely regular pentagon. So the pink line there is the line of symmetry. And Robert Viertek, in his studies of the city mounds, decided that they were arranged around a specific symmetrical pentagonal shape. Next, we have the face, which is very regular and has a tendency towards parallel sides, that the slope up to the face platform is very similar in length and parallel. So there's a good example of, informal geometry. For hardcore geometry, we go to the bright mounds, which are in this kind of area here, which are Giza-sized pyramidal mounds. And these have incredible geometrical properties. Some of it first discovered by Hoagland and Torren, and work by Professor McDaniel and Dr. Crater have developed this much further. So in this diagram, all the lines are the same color are running parallel to each other. So there's 2 green, 2 yellow, 2 blues, and 3 reds. And that suggests that each of these mounds, these 6 mounds, must be on some kind of a grid. So McDaniel has found that this grid is based on what's known as a tetrahedral rectangle, which is derived from tetrahedral geometry. And we find that these 6 here, which rotated, all fit on node points of this grid. And that in turn gives rise to 3 significant types of tetrahedral triangle, as well as some 19.5-degree angles within it. So we'll move on to subsidence and implosion. And in this case, with 2 cases in the D&M pyramid itself. So near the top on the eastern side of the D&M pyramid, we have this depression, which could be due to subsidence. And in this southern part of it, we have like a 4-sided shape, which is shown roughly here in the green. So that suggests if the subsidence going on, it's into a void which has a geometric shape. And then on the southeastern corner of the D&M pyramid, we have what, instead of a thick buttress like on this side, we have what seems to be like a collapsed mini archeology. And when we look into that, we find all these, like the stubs of the internal partitions that once existed. And I've outlined these in green and in pink, and it's quite complicated. So that could be evidence that this is a construction. Moving on, we get to the East or City Mound in the Cydonia City Mounds. And this and the D&M pyramid are examples of what I call a type 1 archeology design, in that they either radiate from a strong central core or central spine, and they what radiates out are support walls, shown in yellow here. And these support a shell which has been collapsed and worn down, so you've only got this outer outlines of that shell now as a stub. And in the space between the support walls is where I theorize there was once multi-story living space. So if we move over to the right, this living space is now filled in with rubble and perhaps millions of years of wind-blown dust. And so here we've got what remains of the shell is this outer wall, and then there's quite a deep shadowy dip here, like a moat in the inside of it. So a moat and wall effect. And the outline of the livable alcove, as we'll call it, is this here. So moving on, this is an example of a Martian habitat design where the alcoves have been dug into a cliff, or it could be a hill, and so the rock surrounding them is supporting them. And in this case, the shell covering the alcoves is a transparent one, though in the case of Cydonia. So moving on, in this case, the moat is very wide and shows signs of subsidence, active subsidence by these fissures, which you can see here. And this is sliding into this moat. but it's not filling it. So it's presumably disappearing into basement levels, the voids. And in this case, the alcove hasn't been filled up with material, outer wall here, but there's inner structures as well, which I've tried to show in green and some outer ones in blue. And this is an enlargement of it all, which I've rotated, which you can see. And here, there's like a honeycomb of filled in pits, which could be internal structure that which once existed within this. And here we see the structure that I'm trying to show here. This is a type 2 proposed archeology, where things collapse in the center. So there's a depression, and there's some on this side, there's some, I've outlined in red, some informal geometry. This is another type 2, which has a large, long central depression, like, it's got like ramparts, almost looks like an elongated fort. This is the Cydonia suburbs. There's many square miles of this. And the theory is that it's a collapsed underground city complex with only the partitions remaining and the living areas subsiding. And we compare that with this ruin in the capital, ancient Assyria. There is some similarity between this below ground subsidence and this above ground building complex. This is the face. We're now looking at ruined structure, crumbling subsidence pits, which could be evidence of collapsing internal rooms. And in the southeast here, we have these huge, what seem to be the remains of large, huge supporting walls, which have been exposed by these yellow areas, which are areas of slumping. And this is it, seeing these two items a bit bigger for you to look at. Green for the walls, yellow for the slumping, and these subsidence pits on the face's western platform. This is the southeast facet of the D&M pyramid, which has this honeycomb or sponge-like structure, which I'll enlarge, and we can see that the pits are filled with rubble and dust and are probably much deeper and more impressive than we see them now. And we're going to some earth ruin analogues for this. This is Cappadocia, where the ancients burrowed their own archeologies, really crude archeologies, into hills and mountains, giving them this honeycomb effect. This is ruins of Gaoqing in China, where mud brick buildings have been eroded into, and although there's probably been geometry there, it now just looks like natural caves. This is a natural visual analog, which is Tofoni, which you get these irregular grids in the rock, but they never get very big with this kind of intensity, as shown by the geologist's hammer. Modern architectural analogues, where the architects have used structure which is honeycombed, but it is in no way regular in size or shape. On the right, is a proper honeycomb building proposed, but if this eroded, we'd expect it to become more irregular. This is the eastern facet of the D&M, where there are building-sized highly degraded, something like a support matrix, which has been exposed by a little bit of subsidence. And we go on to another part of the east side facet again of room-sized grids. Go on to a larger view, and you can see sort of hollows surrounded by these raised grids. Just let you see that. Modern architectural analogues are the reinforced concrete boxes of the building of the Hoover Dam, into which was poured more concrete, and a grid sculpture here showing how strong a grid structure could be for holding up a roof of an archeology. This is the north facet, and again we've got things drifting horizontally and vertically. And this is another part of the north facet, lots of rubble covering it, but much more regular in the spacing of the downward ridges and the horizontal ridges. So you're getting the sort of regular rectangles. This is the western facet of the D&M, which is collapsing from the bottom up, and the more advanced the collapse, the more geometrical the grid, as you can see here, more right-angled. This is another part of the western facet of the D&M. Again, a very regular grid, very ruin-like. And then we leave Cydonia to go to the southern hemisphere of Mars and Ariadnes region, where we seem to have lots of structures emerging from having been buried by sediments, which turned into rock over millions of years. And we have these enormous grids. In this case, this is about 800 feet across, and there's lots of room and building-like cells caused by the harder grids that are coming out of the rock, soft rock as it erodes. This is another example. The grids are mostly in this axis, room size this time. A archeology-sized hill. Again, lots of raised grids, and have to understand these have been crushed perhaps under the weight of the rock that once covered them, so it's very disorganized. This one is very right-angled, 600 feet across, very right-angled, paralleled ridges, more eroded on the left side. And if I was an archaeologist seeing this from the air and it was on Earth, I'd want to dig in this particular location. Rectangles, squares, crisscrosses. And this is a ruin analog, Peru's Corral Pyramids, which before they're excavated are covered in their own rubble and sand and just look like hills. But when excavated, we can see it's got lots of structure and partly restored, lots of structure, and are very similar to what we've been seeing previously. Natural analog is cemented fractures. Some of them can be very geometrical and artificial looking. I do wonder whether they are actual artifact fossils right here on Earth, but they never get very big like what we see there. So not room or building size. This is the Paratopia complex in Western Argyll. Lots of grids eroding out of the rock, but we'll concentrate on this bit here. Let you watch it for a few seconds. So the soft rock here, but harder things coming out, looking very designed and possibly the foundational levels of a previous archaeology millions of years ago. And ending with Mount Sharp in Gale Crater, where Curiosity rover is. 50 meters is 169 feet. Grids again, rooms, some building size ones, another example on Mount Sharp, further out this time of what's there. So grids are a good thing to look for, which could turn out to be the ruins of a past Martian civilization. And I'll sign off.
The strangest thing, though, some of the many people that I've mentored over the years, sometimes the ones that have done the best stuff are the people that I've snubbed and told, nah, basically told them they weren't worth a crap and didn't know what they were talking about. And then they go to prove you wrong. Mm-hmm. They will go to extreme lengths to prove you wrong. And then at the end, I'm looking at the body of their work going, you got some pretty good stuff.
Keith Laney, website, thehiddenmission.com. He's an artist, copper master, amateur space scientist, and avid promoter of space exploration who revels in targeting and producing planetary imagery. He prowls the surfaces of Mars and the Moon like a preying lion. Little escapes his technologically enhanced powers of vision, discernment, and perception, nor his intellect. This reflects in his gigapans, his sight, his work, and his life. His primary passion in this life, after family, is space imaging. His work has been featured by NASA, mainstream news organizations, disclosure conferences, and planetary anomaly lovers the world over. Keith hosts a privately unequaled online collection of space imaging, planetary curiosities, his own writings and music, which just celebrated its 16th anniversary.
All right, get to the first slide here. First question I'd like to ask everybody, and that's a change. I'm going to ask the question is, how would we recognize ancient artifacts from a Martian civilization? And as an example, we got a nice one. When Boeing commissioned this poster to be made for Bush 1's Mars Initiative, what was it called, Mars 1, back in the day, and it's captioned by George Bush himself, and it says, "Why Mars?" It says, because it's humanity's destiny to strive, to seek, to find, and because it's America's destiny to lead. Well, in this picture, what we see across the Martian landscape, two astronauts coming over a hill, and what greets them on top of the hill. And now, mind you, this is an official artist commission. Okay. What I did was I turned up the light on this picture so you can actually see what the artist was trying to represent. And what we have is irregular masonry with right angles. And we have a large face here on the side of stacked blocks. It looks a whole lot like the Mars we're seeing in the Curiosity images, doesn't it? Well, one thing that you notice when you look a little bit deeper at this image, and now art is also a very distinguishing characteristic that we look for in anomaly hunting, especially on the surface. The geometry of an area from overhead and from looking at it will tell you clues about artificiality and give you clues about possible civilization or remnants there. But the art will show you that it was a culture. The Martians had a really peculiar manner of art, too, as represented in this picture now. And don't ask me if this was inspired or if they gave this guy specific instructions on what to put in this picture. But what he's managed to represent here are things of the same nature that I'll be showing you in my presentation. Now, if you follow my cursor, you see the big face on the block here. But that's not the only one. If you look toward the bottom of his face, there's another face right here. I'm circling it. And now this is artistic. And everything in this picture was designed to be here. Someone had to paint it there. This is not pareidolia. I'm not seeing something. This is something that the artist painted with his brush so that we could see it. And You just happen to have to bring the light up in the picture to see it. And there's also ersatz art around here. You see a little skull over here. You see what could possibly be inscriptions along the tops of the blocks here. You see this kind of stuff in this Mars Curiosity imagery. And I've been seeing it all along. We explored the Murray Buttes, and there are a series of hills that range from ground level to 80 feet tall. Some of them may be up to 120, but the ones we're looking at here are generally about 80. And Curiosity sees so well that sometimes it sees so well that you forget that this thing is as big as it is. But so what we see here is just an amorphous hillside of debris, stuff sticking out of, buried, half rotting away, falling down the hillside. But when the question comes in is when you actually start zooming in. And these, the pictures that I put together are gigapans. And what I do is I take a whole saws or 2 or 3 saws, however long it took them to take a particular scene's imagery. And I compile them all together, balance them. And I happen to use the lossless science data when it comes out from TDS because I'm really picky about stuff like the quality of my pictures. When you look into these pictures, though, at first you just see rocks. And everybody does. And this is the way they're getting it by us and showing this stuff because no one really notices it. That stuff is nuts. But you zoom in onto the little area there and you see that, maybe it's not just rocks. Personally, I see art here. I see a helmeted figure, and it's pretty eroded because this stuff is old. And it really, once it's exposed, and the wind exposes it from out of its protective layer of debris that's been covering it for eons, it tends to decay rather rapidly because of the sandblasting winds and so forth and conditions on Mars because it's freezing and then it's hot on the surface, freezing and hot every night, not just in the summertime, but in the wintertime, it's extremely freezing, and the temperature variation causes the stuff to crumble and fall down the hill. But what we see on art here, the same thing sort of that we were seeing on the blocks. This fellow has got a helmet on. It's some kind of ersatz idea. It's got inscriptions and some kind of ersatz little face on its side. Here he is, his nose, his mouth. He's got a little entourage of other guys carved into the rock face here. And it's all just being exposed. You see where the dirt and stuff is getting off the side of this because these mounds were probably once huge buildings. And they were probably replete and covered with fine art because the civilization seemed to have a penchant for carving likenesses on things and animals and inscripting things. Used a whole lot of rock and some kind of material that looks to be perhaps 3D printed. Okay, so we move forward and we go to Sol 1077, which is a completely different other area on Mars, other than the Murray Buttes. And I like to look in debris piles. I'm not sure what happened on Mars. It must have been pretty cataclysmic because you see everything's just broken and shattered up. And this is not your garden variety of sandstone. This is pretty hard rock that you would see here if it's rock. Just at first notice, you see the stacked items here. You see this here. This looks like something that's melted and wadded up. Okay. Various little anomalies laying around. When you get in closer, though, you see it's a head laying there. And let's say something about, we see this type of rock here, and it's not rock, this is sculpture. This is all fractured sculpture. This was probably a head that was on it. There's no telling what it was. It could have been a great big, once upon a time, all this material that's laying there that shattered could have been, something that you see like La Pieta or something, just in a modern, you see this guy's sort of Olmec. It's in sort of a modern-esque kind of grotesque style, but there are all types of styles. So the culture that this came from was highly advanced, highly artistic, and whatever they did to this place that made this happen, or whatever happened to them, is quite tragic, and it's part of our history. This stuff is anthropomorphic. When you look at it, it's human. The face that we saw sticking out the side of the mound a minute ago is human. This face right here would come out of La Venta. It's an Olmec head, small version. The whole thing's probably maybe 14 inches tall. It's not very big. Here we go. To do this, these are from La Venta. One is an Olmec head, for comparison. The other one is an actual depiction of a god inside of a flying serpent. But the headpiece was what I thought was relevant here because you see the ring device behind his head. It's the same sort of thing that is on this little statue. But there are numerous things just lying about the ground, where Curiosity's been riding through the ruins the whole time during its journey. But it's not the only one that rode through ruins. We had another little rover, which I happen to have been a part of the program, and it was Spirit and Opportunity. Spirit on Saw 165 drew my attention immediately, and I was watching this mission when it rolled past what I clearly saw to be a bottle. It's right in the center of the screen. Some people have problems seeing it, not particularly me. It happens to have rover tracks right beside it, and the rover tracks on that particular image are about 12 inches wide. So that's about the size of that bottle. It would be about the size of a Roman amphora. So what I did was I found a derelict Roman amphora that was found in the Aegean Sea, superposed it onto the image right beside the ancient amphora and sitting there for comparison. Pretty much shocked me, that at the idea at that time, this was the Spirit mission, and we knew it landed at a pretty crazy place. The overhead images really bear that out. It's another place, sort of like where they landed Curiosity. We seem to have a penchant for wanting to land our spacecraft at super ancient cities on Mars, almost like they know where they are preternaturally. Either way, Spirit pretty much found an amphora, amongst many other things, and I advise everybody to go back and check the images from Spirit, because it kind of died early, but it saw a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff, that people weren't so sure about how to do the imaging. And, oh, by the way, I pretty much know how to do all of this imaging from the PDS. I'm pretty much in the stock way that it's done and how to enhance it. If anyone needs help with any of this, I am highly available. Keith Laney. Search for me. I'm on all the social sites. Find me, find my email, and ask me. I'm happy to teach. All right, now let's turn back to the Murray Buttes again. Same place we had the statue at the very first part of my presentation. And once again, we're drawing back and we're looking at something that, as you were going by, paying attention, it's just a bunch of rocks, it's crumbling out of the hillside. Although we happen to know that these aren't really natural hillsides. And when you look down amongst the debris, notice this little item here. Now there's also another piece of sculpture here, but that's not what I'm focusing on. That's just coincidental to the search, because this stuff is everywhere, and that'll kind of show you. When we draw on this, to me, this is some sort of ancient tech, and we have no idea what sort of tech this civilization used. For all we know, it could have been some sort of igneous rock with embedded live crystals on it that was some sort of living technology. We don't know. It was obviously more advanced than ours, because look at the way they stack their cities. Look at the DMM pyramid that Bob was just showing us that I was happy to provide imagery for. Look at it. Look at the central mound that Curiosity's at right here, Gale Crater, Aeolus Mons. It's a huge archeology. For months and months, people went on about the city on the mountain, and I'm constantly crying, no, the city is the mountain. But what we have here is technology and straight edges, right angles that don't lie. See the embossed right angle here? That's a piece of casing, as well as this. It's a piece of housing here. Another strange item about this is, do you see the hexagonal pits inside the center of this with the little raised dots in the middle of them? Yeah, it could be some sort of living technology. And don't forget the little ball and socket piece here with the Y. Right here. So this is some sort of piece of broken technology that's managed to erode its way out of the mound and fall down into pieces and lay right there so Curiosity could see it. I'm so glad that they didn't notice this and blur it out or do their little mesh thing that they love to do over the most curious of items. Okay, now this brings us to another area. This is taken when we first pulled up on the Murray Buttes. And what a sight it was. The mound in front of you to the left is one of the ones that's about 100 meters tall. 100 feet tall. And so it's considerable size here. You see it's maybe 25, 30, 40 feet up out of the valley floor. Rover saw this, and that's where it went. After a short shutdown where they went and explored it unofficially. When it came back on, we were a little bit closer. We saw the little thing sticking up out the side of the hill. Got a close look at it. I wondered, what in the world is this? And why is it precariously balanced out? sort of like a sign park in a national monument. You know, this is what happened here. Days further, we got closer, got better with that. Seems to be a highly eroded surface. Everybody spent weeks and weeks looking at this thing, going, "Wow, what is it?" You know, it's got the right angle geometries on it that say it's pretty much unnatural. However, it's highly eroded, and looking at it, it just looks like a gob mess. After a while of looking at it, I started to see a seam. Yeah, and then one day it popped. And it may just be a sign park at a national monument. May just be. Some people see technology in it. I see a scene, and there's more to it than what I have delineated in the colors on the right-hand panel. There's more to it. There's carvings. There's possible symbols along the bottom edge here. Possibly a whole nother person in effigy right here on the side of it. Either way, this thing is amazing. And here it is perched precariously on this edge and all this crumbling rock like it was placed there purposefully. Now we get to the main area. This is what Curiosity is looking at. This is where Curiosity's goal is. This was the whole point of the mission of Curiosity. And they snuck it right in, landed right here, skirted the whole area, taking pictures, not really showing it to us, you know, making us wait for raw data that's good so we can see it. Not saying a thing about it. But if you take a look at this scene that's here, and this is an MRO high-rise image that's laid onto the DTM of the area. And it's a little bit exaggerated height, but it's high-rise resolution laid over a shape map. And it's pretty much as good as any one of the Curiosity long-distance shots that we've seen, probably at a little bit better of a vantage point. And it shows you the city mountain. It shows you the ceremonial pyramids that are in front of the passage. And this is where they plan to take Curiosity. Curiosity right now is somewhere about right where my cursor is. They plan on taking it here. Now, they need to go explore right here because this area here is also great big pyramids. They all line this whole valley. And I think this is totally amazing. The civilization that did this, Jesus is nothing compared to this. We have nothing compared to this. The whole city is the mountain. And below the mountain is the ceremonial area all around it. Now, what we're looking across here appears to be, just a series of pyramidal mounds, maybe an archeology here, as Bob says, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or, the whole thing is a darn archeology. But I'm going to take us overhead and look straight down on this area right here that we're focused on. Oh, what is that? Now, we switched it because the MRO takes a picture with north at the top and south at the bottom. And whereas in the image we were looking at a minute ago, it's flipped around where we were actually looking south as up. So you flip the script on it, flip the picture around, look up from look from MRO's eye, look down from MRO's eye straight on the scene, and what we see is a gigantic effigy laid down on the ground. This is a phoenix with a little hint right there for you to see it. It's laid out in the valley. This is where we're looking at. This is where we're going. All of these are complete with art, even with the flames. Imagine what this looked like at one time. There was once a river that ran through here, and there was water all around this thing. It was probably colored and painted. Looked like a great big flaming phoenix with pyramids all behind it. And those are indeed pyramids. We saw them from the ground. Now, the question is, what kind of race had the power to carve the ground at will in any sort of effigy they pleased? Because this is no small area. This is, a couple kilometers across this thing, which is maybe a mile. That's huge. And it's lit up with pyramids. We're going to take this rover right through here, and we're going to see this if they let us, if we don't lose a wheel. So you guys stay tuned, because you know how I'm going to be showing it to you. So with that, that's my presentation. And thanks for listening.
Well, that's fabulous.
We don't really know the precession of Mars with enough accuracy to know where constellations would be. Solar system objects are different, but background constellations depend on precession. Now, from the InSight mission, which will have a resolution of like 1 foot on the surface, 1 foot uncertainty in terms of location, in a few months to a year, we'll have the precession rate of Mars down to 0.0001, that kind of thing. Half a million years ago, we know that the face was a rising point for the Earth as seen from the center of the city complex, what Robert calls the mounds, the pyramids, huge scale, and they're a mile on a side. Cynthia is the artistic director for the original Mars project and producer now for The Other Side of Midnight. Cynthia sculpted the first ever face on Mars, which appeared on the first edition of The Monuments of Mars. She unveiled her Cody Mars face at the Cody conference, where researchers including me, John Anthony West, Eugene Maloff, Tom Van Planert, and many others met to discuss these anomalies, actually kind of for the first time. When the Mars Global Surveyor photographed the face on Mars, she set about to sculpt it again to include the new data revealed in the new NASA images. That sculpture, the Malta Bronze, was featured on a later edition of my Monuments of Mars book cover designed by Cynthia. She also organized the first Mars exhibit and was a key organizer for 2 JPL rallies in protest of NASA's, shall we say, less than candid policies on all of this. Cynthia sculpted the face several more times and has created a 3D computer model used in Mars face animations featured on PAX TV.
I am going to take you all on an adventure of seeing. First, I just want to give you a taste of ancient civilizations, ruins that we have here on our planet. You know, around 2,000 years old, here we are in Jerusalem. And this is the ancient caves in the Kidron Valley, again, Jerusalem. Notice how they've carved into the rock and these large giant boulders and rocks that have fallen down. So here we have Calvary Hill, again in Jerusalem. Notice the layers of rock and how they burrowed into the cave. And here is Petra in Jordan. Again, they've carved into the rock to create their structures. It's not only the temple building that you see there, but it's also the adjoining structures to the right and left and above. Here is Babylon in Iraq. And we're looking overhead, and I want you to notice how it's getting difficult to notice really what's there. And these are only a couple thousand years old. Now, here's another really ancient structure. Immediately, you're struck by the foundation there. Here is the Sumerian city of Ur in Mesopotamia. And of course, you can see the sacred temple on the bottom right there. But if you look around on the rest of the area, if you weren't looking closely, it would be lost. This is King David's tomb. Again, carving into the rock. And here's an interesting thing. It kind of looks like there could be a face there on that side of that rock. And this is the Palace of David discovered in Kir. And I'm bringing this one up because I want to show you what NASA was doing before with the colorization of photos. So here I've added like a filter. In the earlier photos, NASA was putting out this kind of butterscotch film, so it was making it harder to discern the different qualities of character, mineral, or what it was made out of, because the color made things invisible. So here you see with and without this kind of colorization. This is a shrine in the city of Talachich, and you can see how the green really highlights the structure of this building. But when we do this, now suddenly, imagine you're way far away. It's not so visible, especially down in the lower right-hand side. So Chesley Bonsdell was a magnificent artist. This is painting where he was expressing the ancient stone structures, what he imagined them to be like. Picture here is something like the Acropolis or something, an ancient temple that's looking out over a vast vista. And now here we have again a platform similar, looking out over a vast vista. It just so happens that this platform is actually on Mars. And I want you to notice, see here, here's like the wall of this structure, and it's coming along here and along here. So now I put this orange here so you can see more clearly the structure. Let's go again. You see, here is this structure. We're looking at a foundation. Now, do you see it? You see here? Use your eyes. Get used to looking at shadows, at the context of where we are, the location. We're overlooking this vast view. This area that I'm showing you is right here. We're looking at this area. I'm zooming in. And look here. This is parallel with these. And can you see here? There, trace that along. And here's another one going like this and coming out here. So if you start tracing those, you start seeing something like this, which could be like the rebar of the structure. So now you see this? Now look from a distance. Here we go again. Here's the rebar coming along, and you see this kind of pattern. See here, from here to here, you're tracing this. And here's another one coming along here, and it continues over here. So what's filling in here now is the structure. Take a look. That's where we were looking. Let's zoom in again. Zooming in again. Now look yourself. And what do you see? Oh, wait a moment. Here we were, right? Remember seeing the rebar, but what is this over here? Let's just take our attention over here. That could be, is it? What do you see there? Could it be that this is a torso? Could it be that this is a face with a nose, chin, cheekbone, eye, hair? We'll only know really when we go there, but when you add everything together, the context of where this is in a structure that has clearly foundational platform. And what is this? This pieces of statue lying around. You can even see here how it's a different color. So we're looking at the color. We're looking at the structures. You see how the ground is actually caving in here in these areas. So this is going along here, and this one's going along here, and these are going here, here. And you can see that the ground has caved in between those areas. Now here we are again, looking out on this vast view. And I'm going to bring our attention. Oh, actually, I'm going to bring you up here. Let's take a look and see what is up here. I mean, this is overlooking Gale Crater, and it's Sol 529. And this area, there's so much to discover here. So I'm going to zoom in on this area. So take a look here. What do you see here? What is this? Look at that. And look, it's got like parallel lines. And then here, it's like a finger or some protrusion. You can see these are not rock shapes. And look at this little piece coming up here. And these pieces. So now what I've done is I've colored it so you can see just even a little more clearly. You can see, look, there's a parallel in this. It seems to be like some metal clamp. And here, clearly, it's a finger-like clamp sticking up. And here's like a wire tubing coming along. And look at this with this right angle here. Here's another right angle. Look at that. And look at this. Here's this tubing coming along here. And look at this nice straight line. And look at this one. Look at that. You can see the background behind it. What would be finger-like like that? So, going a little further here. I wonder what's down here in this area. Let's zoom in on this area here. Okay. There's the structure. I've got it orange so you have some orientation. There's the structure. Look here. Look, this is parallel. It's like a big piece of wall fell or something. And this is like the end of a corner turned upside down. And let's see, what do we have down here? Look at this. Here's this little pipe with a little hole at the tip of it. And here, look here. And then here. Okay, just take a look. Oh, and don't forget to look at this, precious. Look at this. Look at this uniform light coming around here and here. And this thin little object was like, okay. So adding a little color, making it a little more visible. Take a look. Let your eyes discover. Okay, above is how the photo is. And below I've highlighted some things I find to be very unusual. Look at this one here. It looks like a hexagon shape. And it's thin. It has a uniform edge. Same happening here. These little plates, they've got this uniform edge. Look at this edge here. It's uniform. And look at this. This is like a half cylinder sliced. Same thing you see happening here. See that nice curve coming around? And you see here. Just let your eyes kind of take in looking at one way and another. So this is the kind of process we're using when we're looking at these photos. Let's zoom in and let's compare some things. You can see here this nice, beautiful right angle. Look at this one. I really like this. Here's a rock, and here's the darkest of the rock, but look how pitch black that is. Clearly, that is a tube with a hole. That is not just the end of the rock like a dark shadow, because it would look like this. But instead, it's really, really dark. And you can see there's like uniform, this thickness right here. And here is being repeated. And then here's sitting on this plate, which has this uniform, very thin plate. You can see over here better. It's like some canister, like a gas tank or something. I'm not a machine person, but clearly this is some kind of tank with a hose and a hole. And all around here, you're seeing things that just aren't very rock-like, including this big piece just all of a sudden just sticking up like that. How bizarre. And notice the difference in color. Notice how dark it is compared to everything around it. Even where it's light, it looks different than the terrain around it. Well, that most likely is because it was probably a part of the wall. There must have been some kind of something up here. This is a foundation for something. Where did it all go? Here we go. These big pieces. They've rolled down the hill. So we're looking at location, context, scale, size, color. Look at the difference in colors of you can see there's a difference in color of these kind of stone from what the Martian terrain is. And here I'm just accentuating it a little bit so you can let your eyes take it in. Just let yourself observe. You will recognize things. And pretty much that's my presentation.
Look, there's a whole bunch of other young people out there just itching for something real and new. And like Richard said, that shooting, and then all of these teenagers across, well, at least the United States, were bonding together and banding together, linking together, because they're the best at it.
Right.
They are ready to make real change.
Will Farrar, website whatsupinthesky.com. Will Farrar grew up in Maryland, where he started his career in technology at the young age of 16 and is currently the Information Technology Director for a national healthcare company, as well as the man behind the Space Anomaly YouTube channel, What's Up in the Sky 37, and the website whatsupinthesky.com. He attributes his keen eye for spotting anomalies in imagery to his fascination with images returned from various spacecrafts, as well as his travels around the United States visiting various national and state parks. Will is also known for applying various technological approaches in his hunt for anomalies in space imagery that has helped make his case for obfuscation in the past. Will is an accomplished musician and artist, and he brings those skills of discernment to his quest.
All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Will Farrar, as Cynthia said, and we are looking at one of my favorite pictures from NASA. I've taken this directly from the website, not the planetary database system. So this is one that you can grab from your phone, from all sorts of places. It is it's an actual Molly cam shot, which is a little bit, it's the Rover arm shot. And if you can take a look at it real quick and see if you guys can find anything interesting. To me, it reminds me of some of the ruins down in Peru, all over, really, Mexico, the South American continent. And what I've done personally, I've always looked for symmetry. I've gone away from looking at a lot of the things that could be called clouds, especially with the YouTube channel and things like that. If I put out, statue on Mars, a lot of people don't register it. But when we have geometry involved in it and symmetry, I found that it registers a lot more. So if you guys are honing in on something, I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of the ones that I really enjoy from this picture. And I've got another one that's the exact same spot, but it's just a little bit more to the right. As for scale, we're looking approximately right in front of us. If I go ahead and I'll pull up my big green cursor here, this block right here, I would say is about 2 foot by 2 foot. There are no Curiosity rover tracks to go by, but that's just looking at the mosaics over time. And you guys will get used to that as you keep searching, as you become addicted to searching these images. It's becomes a hobby. So what I do first is I'm always looking for block-like structures, things that could have fallen off of, what NASA calls buttes, or possible any structures over time. I said, I'm not sure how long ago and how much water hit this stuff after the cataclysm that hit there. So let's go ahead and go over a couple of these right now. We've got this block right here I've always thought was interesting. It's got almost a square look to it, but it looks like a kind of like a piece of fascia or something that came rolling down off of one of the actual walls somewhere along the way. You can see it's got slits in it, almost like the other one. I'm going to go and zoom in here a little bit for you, because next to it as well, we've got a very interesting piece that's worked itself out somehow into a shape almost like a basin or something along those lines, water delivery system. I personally think what we're looking at here is an actual statue or an area that was destroyed, and in this radius, and you'll see also in the pulled out picture that I do next, that there are a lot of different random things in the back that you can see, things in the front. What might have grabbed your eye, sometimes I always say when I start my videos, I see what I see and you see what you see. I think it comes down to your personal ideas of what you've seen in life. If you've everybody has a different eye and a different view. So this one right here was always one, but one of my favorites. It's got rivets in it, and when I look for things like rivets, divots, I want to see symmetry. I want to see something that's actually that runs the same size. Like right here, if you're looking at here with this guy from here to here and then from there to there, you're looking at about the same width as that comes down. So which tells me that that most likely was either chiseled in or was maybe laid in for another piece to come on top of it. There are what seems to be maybe a little bit ornate pieces to the front, and the whole piece has a, if you're looking at the line here with the green, you can see it's open right there, almost like a water flow or something that would come through there. And you're going to see a couple more of those on this image itself. Now, if I could back out a little bit here, and more, once again, you see the symmetry. This is why I picked this one. A lot of times you can find one or two on one picture that look, symmetrical. Some have straight lines, but this one is overwhelming. And that's one thing that I've always tried to do is have, when there's more than just 1 to 2, 3, I like to have 4 or 5 at least in one image to say, okay, this is more than just a coincidence. Especially after just traveling national parks and things like that and seeing with my eyes, what water can do to rocks and what erosion can do. And some of this stuff is so far off. Most of the metals and things, I believe personally, and I don't speak for the whole imaging panel, but I think a lot of the metal and things that we would be seeing, and we have seen some in the past, are pretty much gone. I mean, if you look here, just in 200 years, or in the 10 years I've been at my house I'm at now, I've got metal outside that's totally rusted out and just disappearing with time. Now, up here you have, once again, one of my favorite blocks. It looks like kind of like a quarter piece to something. It's a fairly big. Let me make it bigger on the screen for you guys so you can see it. And what's interesting about this one is it's got what look to be inlaid cut pieces. Now, if you're familiar with some of the ancients on Earth, they used to use ingots and metal to hold blocks together at one time. And that would be indicative of something like that they could have had molten or smelted that metal in there to hold this in place before whatever cataclysm it was. But this one was always interesting to me, and it's right below another piece that has, let's see if I get that even just a little bit bigger for you. Lines and shapes that come out that almost look like tubing. There's a lot of Mars is just filled with stuff that looks like tubing. And you've got pieces here where, when I was mentioning on the basin piece up there, I thought you've got where you've got the symmetry the whole way through the cut, almost like this piece was another piece that was cut with it. Let me back it out. Hopefully you guys can see that. And then keep bringing you on up, because this whole image is just filled with good stuff to take a look at. What I also always look for too are very clean cuts. Like up here, you've got a very clean cut on this piece right here. You've got another clean cut here, another clean cut here. And when you are working with the NASA images, and right now you're looking at a version of it that has here's how it came from NASA. Basically, I've brought it in and hit auto color in Photoshop. I've done nothing else. I haven't sharpened anything. So if you can see the contrast between what just the Photoshop alone puts it into different color. NASA calls it white balancing when they put what they believe is the color on it. This has always worked good for me. You'll learn over time what's good for you, whatever graphical program you're using. And some of you might not even be using it. Since there is so many ways of finding these images. Now, up here, the reason I say this one could be a statue, and let me go get my green arrow again and come up to these areas up here where I was showing you that. On my channel, I got so much feedback from just this image alone. Almost looks like you've got, once again, the symmetry between the two and almost the exact same width. It almost looks like a foot of a statue. That's just speculation, but it certainly does have what looks to be right angles inside of it, carved on top of it. And then you've got what looks to be kind of circlish here in the middle. It comes down, comes out, and then comes down with this and just kind of runs up the piece, which once again, to me, symmetry, the distance, the lines, scream artificial to me. Here we go. We have another clean cut. And the clean cuts to me are indicative of what we see here on Earth many times, over and over again. I keep going, like I always, a lot of my comparisons I do are with Peru, Pumapunka, places like that, where it's just amazing things that we're finding. But we found them in such ruins here on Mars that you've got to kind of do a little bit of you got to look a little bit harder to find it, because we're not sure if these were brought here by water, if this was just a big altar or some place that just was destroyed, and here's where it's set to rest. I do believe that there's a lot of water there pushing things around for a while. The things that are buried halfway, and that's why I think a lot of these did get buried in the actual dirt and things like that. But here again, once we've got another piece up here where you've got your through and through, follows the exact same length down and up. It almost looks like a cross in there. And the only reason I say that is because it just looks like that. It's got here and up, tossed through here and down through here, has that same look to it. Now, this could be an illusion because of this piece right here. So you've got to look out for that as well. So you weigh in the factors. And if you're going to share this thing, when you start sharing your images with people, it's best to pick the best couple that the ones that really stand out to you and say, okay, wow, this is strange. Up here, we're going to go up, take a look at here. And this is the horizon out here. If you noticed out here, the camera that's used to take this shot is one that's on the rover it's like on the arm, and is usually used to take really microscopic images. But every once in a while, it'll take an image that looks like it takes an image looking straight out, and you get a lot better quality than you do from some of the mass cams. But this piece I just wanted to show you guys, it comes down in bows, but it's got a 90-degree angle that comes out here, and almost it's not exactly 90, but more of like I would say 95 degree, but it moves and goes with the actual curve of the piece. Let me show you more symmetry, basically. This piece right here has intrigued me, and it's going to be in the next image as well that I'm going to show you real quick. It's because it's the same area, same type. From here to here, it looks like they've already done it, but if you look at the cut in this rock or stone, it's shaped pretty much the same way throughout it, almost like you could cut this from here. If you took and just chopped that off and made a real fresh mark on it, you could fold it in on each other right through there. And once again, you've got your slits in it that look to be cuts, that don't look indicative of water to me. These are a little bit further along, I think, than water would be. And this one is one that you're going to hopefully enjoy. And if you see what comes out of it, there's a piece that almost looks like tubing that comes down out of it. When you get in this far, you start getting a lot of the JPEG artifacts that start coming through. You can see them over there. But it's a very interesting site. And so even up at the top, you've got the interesting things out here out on the horizon, more what seem to be square blocks. Let's look up here real fast. And then I want to switch you over to another image. This is the same area taken by the same camera, but you're going to see you can see down here where we were looking at that basin earlier. That's what I'm calling it, a basin. Sometimes you got to be careful what you call things. Here's our block again that is interesting. And then up here, we get to take another look at this piece, which once again is one of my favorite pieces, just because we can't see the backside of it. So a lot of that's a guessing game here. But when you've got these like lines in there and they're look to be carved on top, they don't go down too far. Hopefully you can see this, but right here, there's another perfectly straight cut that looks like it's been actually cut into that stone. So you've got another piece here that's just another symmetry all the way. If you cut this surfboard looking piece, that's what we're going to call it today, and cut it in half and fold it, it looks like it would fold right up on each other. But this to me was very interesting. This piece right here it has a square, which is, once again, we're looking for geometry. This is how I do my methods. I look for geometry now, and it looks like some type of beam could have been most likely. It's definitely not wood or petrified wood. It looks to be built in stone, but you've got a piece that comes out of here, and it comes up here. And let me go ahead and use this here and point this out a little better. Here's the beam that comes across it. Then you've got two pieces that slide up and over it, and they come down almost like a wire type mesh. It's a very interesting spot. This is on Sol 1065, which is, of course, if hasn't been mentioned yet, the Sol is the day on which the rover was there. So the rover had been there searching for 1,065 days by the time they came to this area. Now, over here is where you start getting into things that are ornate, and your eyes can start playing tricks on you. This reminds me of a piece here on Earth. I actually just saw Brian Forrester put out a video that had water where two of these things would have been put together, and this would form a waterway between it. You can see how it's got the dip in it. Right here is where it goes, and then it's connected, this piece is, but you also have a drill out spot here for what it looks like. And if you're familiar with ancient things on Earth, a lot of the ancients used water. They had to move water. I mean, water is one of the most important things for life, especially if you want to sustain a population. Even if you just want to sustain your family or yourself, you need it. So moving water to areas, and like I said, I'm not sure, we're not really 100% sure when the cataclysms happened here. I think why we're looking at this is because it's been such upheaval. There was such a either war or impact that all the rest of this stuff is just thrown about. You could search some of these and find maybe sister companions for it. But once again, you've got that piece up here. The surfboard guy, that's one that really just the symmetry of it. Like I said, you cut it in half and you fold it, and the bevels on it. A lot of these rocks, stones have bevel, which is where it comes out and folds up. This necessarily isn't one, but you can see how this piece here comes out, folds up, rolls on over, and comes out into this next piece here, almost like they were connected with something. Who knows what could have been, that could have been used for, or if it's just a piece of rubble that's sitting here. Let me go grab this down here. But to me, when you add up, like I said earlier, if it's one piece and it's not perfect, if I just saw this piece somewhere, I wouldn't make a video. I just keep going. But when you find that one piece and it's next to pieces that look similar, like this up here, the blocks down here, things that are more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think we're getting a lot better view of what we're seeing here. All right. This piece right here is one that's been intriguing to me for a while as well. Let me go ahead and move on up. And if you didn't see this in the first little part, once again, this whole area has these what look like little tablets that, once again, if you pick that up and sawed it in half, it looks like it would just fold right in on each other. And once again, it has those markings that follow each other here and here and stays the same width the whole way through. One thing I've always looked for. Same thing here. You're getting a little bit of the JPEG artifacts coming through here, which are the blur and the choppiness of it, but you still have the same width. This thing runs straight through. And I'm sure whoever's watching this, you guys are chomping at the bit saying, oh, he's missed that or he's missed that. And that's wonderful. That's what we want. I leave my channel, especially with YouTube and the people that come there, I leave that wide open for people. Please tell me what I missed. And it's a great feeling to go find something that somebody who's been putting these out for a while missed. So I really, really hope that you will start looking into these. Help us. I mean, there's so many pictures out there available, and this is just one out of hundreds of thousands that we found. Once again, we've got that circle here. This piece up here has always been interesting to me. And as you come up this area here, you've got a little bit more. These are all kind of clumped together. This, if you put in a circle here, these seem to be more the typical same type of structures. And you've got the inlays here, inlays on here. Maybe nothing. Like I said, I see what I see, you see what you see. But here, once again, would be something I'd look at and say, okay, we've got something that looks to be cut. It looks like at one point it was one stone, and here again is another cut on it, and possibly up here a piece that runs off. But once again, we're looking at the same width between these, which screams me artificiality, intelligence. As we back out, there's things on the horizon as well. Let me come down. Let me grab my big green cursor. And I'm just going to let you guys take a quick look into here, because there are a lot more of these straight edges that have been cut out, pieces that look symmetrical, pieces that look art. It's one thing about this camera, when it picks things up a lot better than the mass cam a lot of times. So you can see where there may have been inlays, there may have been what looked to be hieroglyphs. And you get interesting, as always, like I said, when you find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, once you start getting to that many anomalies in one little area, or whatever you want to call them, artifacts. Sometimes anomaly is a word that has been used a little bit too much. And it looks like it's just been weathered, maybe tumbled around, but it kept, there's stonework here on Earth that keeps these, this is kept better than some of the stuff that we see here, especially with the angles. I mean, it's all over these two images. And like I said, it's all over the image NASA library. It's almost as if NASA's pretty much wiped their hands of it and just say, have fun. They've let us peek into the goods. Here you got another, would look to be more angles, and they stay the same size as it runs through here and curves. And all day with this image, you can find that. And if you want to find these online, you just go to, it's the easiest thing to do is you can search right in Google. You go to Google and type in Curiosity Rover raw images. It's going to take you right to their website. And you can sit there and go day by day and just enjoy what you're looking at. I mean, there's so much to see. And never take for granted the black and white images that are there, the nav cam. Some of those may not be as high quality, but some of them have some really good anomalies because they weren't hit with the color cams. They were used as you were driving through. Now the Rover has the auto drive, where it can pretty much, they can tell it to drive half a mile this day, and it uses those black and white images, and it uses cameras and laser, the cam, which it is, to pinpoint where to go. It's amazing, the technology. That's the whole purpose here. And because once you find one, and I'm talking to anybody who's watched this, once you go find one, it can become very addicting. you can start spending late nights looking at pictures of another planet. And especially when you start getting into the other things, there's a lot of wild theories out there. Go look for yourself. That's what I had to do.
We're not looking at one ancient civilization. All our independent work, all our various researchers on this panel this evening have come to the consensus that we're looking at successive cultures going way back in time. We're talking millions and millions of years, up to maybe as recent as 30,000 years ago. And because Mars does not destroy stuff, the atmosphere kind of preserves it. they're all smushed together. They're all sitting there. Imagine what it would be to grow up in a culture where all your ancient ancestors' stuff is sitting out there for you to walk up on and take a look, or to take a shovel and begin to dig. In other words, Martian archaeology is going to be such a feast of millions of years of, and we should hit it on the head, we believe, human cultures prescinding from an ancient source that may not have been human, but that's to be determined when we get there.
Richard C. Hoagland, websites, enterprisemission.com and theothersideofmidnight.com. Richard C. Hoagland is the principal investigator and founder of the Enterprise Mission, as well as the vision and voice of The Other Side of Midnight. He is the recipient of the Angstrom Medal, the former science advisor to CBS News and Walter Cronkite, and author of best-selling books, The Monuments of Mars and Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA. Together with Carl Sagan, Mr. Hoagland co-created the Pioneer Plaque and predicted life on Europa in his groundbreaking paper, The Europa Proposal, published 37 years before NASA's announcement. His vision has inspired a whole new generation of pioneers of thought and form. His work is emulated by cutting-edge thinkers and opened the way for citizen scientists around the globe. He is a thought leader and pioneer, breaking the bonds of stagnant, archaic scientific models. His willingness to challenge the accepted norm has blazed a path for thousands of citizen explorers. He has a way of drilling down to the fundamental question that provokes the unexpected revelation.
I want to move us in a slightly different direction for the remainder of my presentation this evening. This is a planar view of the solar system showing the orbits of Earth and Mars. It shows the fact that Mars is an elliptical orbit, decidedly elliptical compared to the Earth, which is almost circular. And so every opposition, meaning every time Mars comes close, roughly every 2 years, it's not the same distance from the Earth. Back in 2003, remember we had that really, really close opposition, less than 35 million miles, hadn't happened for 60,000 years. Well, coming up this year, on July 27th of 2018, Mars is going to be closest again. It's going to be about 36 million miles away, which is almost as close as it was in 2003. And a whole bunch of stuff is going to happen. There's several spacecraft now either at Mars, ready to make really amazing discoveries, or about to get to Mars. The InSight mission gets there in November. And so I'm predicting, scientifically I hope, that 2018 is going to be the year of Mars. Oh, and that's the year we're going to bring out our book, Hidden Mars, A War in Heaven. So we're hoping this is time to catch public interest because there's a lot on Mars to be interested in. Moving on. At these various oppositions, here's a diagram showing the relative size of Mars as seen through a telescope with same magnification. As you can see, when Mars is pretty far away at an opposition, about 65, 66 million miles, it looks like, let me get my little laser pointer here. It looks like the image in the upper right, this guy. And then when it's really close, it's almost twice as big when Mars is within, let's say, 35, 36 million miles. This is the kind of image we're going to be seeing in July, approaching ever closer every night now. You follow Mars, it will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And until it will look about like this in the sky compared to the moon. This is as big as Mars gets visually from Earth. And yet it's no bigger than one of these craters. In other words, the best you can do with the best telescope you can buy, a la Lowell or the Palomar telescope or the Keck or whatever, this is the maximum image you get through the Earth's atmosphere looking at the planet compared to the moon. So What I want to do is I want to go from Mars, where we can only basically have to rely on official imagery. We can't send our own spacecraft yet. Keith's brilliant work is done on NASA imagery. Robert's work was done on NASA imagery. My work is done on NASA imagery. Keith's work was done on NASA imagery. Tim's work was done. All us are dependent on NASA or other official space agency imagery. Wouldn't it be great if we could democratize this idea of exoarchaeology, extraplanetary archaeology? Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to depend on a space agency, if we could do it ourselves? Well, we have an object much closer, which also we now know has ruins on it, all over it. In fact, I'm just going to kind of show you, and we're going to move quickly here because, again, we don't have much time. And what I would strongly recommend is you listen to these presentations again and again. You pause them, you look at the images, you look carefully, you hone your detection and your geometric skills, and you use this workshop this afternoon and evening as a 3-hour outline for how you can start doing this yourself. Because there's nothing really special about us except we're persistent. We look and we look and we compare and we sift and we cross compare and we talk with each other and we go to archive sources and we go to libraries, with books. And it's basically grunt work. It's like being a detective. It's not, shooting bad guys. It's doing an awful lot of library and literature research. So here's the moon from the Lick Observatory. It's not really a natural moon. It's actually 2 halves of the moon pasted together by Lick in California. Here's the Apennine Mountains. Here's a crater called Grimaldi. Here's Mare Crisium. The Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed right about here in the Sea of Tranquility. So why have I got this up here? Because I think I now know why John Fitzgerald Kennedy was killed. And it's because of this picture. This is part of a sequence of images taken by the CIA, not of the ground, not of Russian missile bases, but as part of something called Project Corona, which sent dozens of spacecraft from 1960 through 1972, photographic reconnaissance satellites into Earth orbit, looking down at the Earth and taking high-resolution pictures, not scanned electronically with television, but on film. This, by the way, is the Washington Monument on an actual corona image. Moving on. This program was initiated by President Eisenhower back in 1959, a few months after NASA was formally born. This object on the left here we'll talk about in a moment. He went to the CIA, and this is what they came up with, the Air Force and the CIA together. You launch a spacecraft into orbit on an Atlas Agena rocket. You get it into orbit, and you start taking photographs. Now, how do you take photographs? Well, in those days, again, the electronic scanning and transmission by television of spy satellite imagery was non-existent. So what they did is they basically put up a huge camera with super lenses, and they ran the film from the supply cassette up through the focal plane of the cameras, and then up through to the top of the spacecraft, coiled it up inside this object, disconnected the whole top of this spacecraft, and that's the part that re-entered after the film was used up. And they deorbited with a retro burn, came down on a parachute, and then a large military transport aircraft, this case a C-119, and I think they also used a Hercules, which is what this is, snagged this thing on a trapeze in midair over the Pacific Ocean, brought it to ground, then sent it by another plane to Langley, where the film was developed. And you got this. This is the Pentagon. Okay. This is original Project Corona film, carefully brought back to Earth, developed, and looked at by experts. And this was the basis of missile detections in Cuba and the discovery there was no basic missile gap with the Soviet Union, et cetera, back during the Kennedy-Eisenhower election. So this was the answer by Eisenhower to the open skies proposal that Khrushchev turned down, that allowed us to replace fear and suspicion and paranoia and guesswork with actual real data. Now, along the way, this guy took over. And the first successful mission of Corona was in August of 1960. So between August of 1960 and November 22nd of 63, when he was killed, this president got to look at an awful lot of Corona imagery. And what I found stunning when I was leaked a copy of Project Corona actual film before one of the Black Ops guys basically took it away from me, stole it. I had a chance to copy several frames of several hundred feet of film that had been returned from space, literally, and preserved by an unknown person. I can tell you where, in Texas. And this came to me through a conference where someone came up to me at the conference and said, "Would you like to see something from the CIA?" And I said, "Of course." And he gave me a place to go get it. And anyway, long story. So I'm looking at this film and I'm having someone else look at it as well. And what was astonishing is on this spy satellite official film, there wasn't one single frame of the Soviet Union. There wasn't one single frame of a missile silo or a Bison bomber or anything that you would think that the CIA would be interested in. Instead, every single frame of a couple of 100 feet of film was shot of the moon. And I'm saying, why would they be interested in the moon? Well, I'm going to show you why. Because if you look carefully, this is now a magnified version of the previous frame. Look here along the edge, what we call the lunar limb. Why is there this bright line? Why, when you take a picture in space, in a vacuum, with very good optics, because this was a super high-tech camera, why would there be a bright line along the edge of the moon? And the line is not just a line, it has width, it has depth, it even seems to have, may I say it, geometry. So let's go on. This is another picture taken at another phase of the moon, and I've had to put these are by the readouts that were photographed on film of the altitude and various other things, specs of the camera that were actually there as meter readings. This is long before digital readouts. This is actual, meters, like voltmeters and other things you're looking at. So again, look at this part of the moon, and you see that there's this remarkable lining of brightness along the edge. Here's a magnified version. Let me magnify this further. Here we are. Now notice that it's not an unbroken line. It appears to have dots. It appears to have spacing. It appears to be regularly irregular. What in the world along the edge of the moon would create this kind of a geometric presentation? There should be nothing over the moon that's geometric at all. There should be a hard vacuum, rocks, space. They should meet. There should be a nice solid line there. No regular spacing geometry. Well, you flash forward the film now. This is the image you were just seeing from 1962. This was just before Kennedy was killed. This is from Project Gambit, another spacecraft in the Corona series. This is a visual image of the lunar limb on the southeastern portion of the moon. This is from 2009. This is an infrared image taken by the LaCrosse mission by NASA decades later. And what you're seeing here is a heat signature. The blue is the coolest. The green is warmer. The yellow is even warmer. The red is the hottest. But look what happens as you look tangential to the moon on an infrared television scan sent back to Earth to Ames Research Center. You've got something yellow, which means it's about this temperature, hovering above the brightest, hottest part of the moon during the lunar day, because this is noon over here and this is sunset over here, about a quarter moon. What could be causing a cool layer, visible, solid, cool layer above the hottest part of the surface of the moon? Well, the simplest explanation is it's something physical arcing over the visible lunar surface, only seen because you're looking through hundreds and hundreds of miles of optical path lengths tangential to the moon. So whatever's there, kind of adds up, it builds up so that it's dense enough to see. And I believe it is something built over the moon as a structure. Now we get to Apollo. A lot of controversy over Apollo. Did Apollo land on the moon? Did they go? Did they fake it on a studio lot in Nevada? All BS, all noise, fake news from NASA. That's a long story. It's in the beginning of Dark Mission. Look along the limb here. This is the edge of the moon, supposedly an airless vacuum, ground space, moon vacuum. But look what happens when we enhance, meaning we just bring up the contrast and the brightness. All along the edge on this Apollo 15 image, there appears to be some kind of structure. This is noise. This is background noise, all right? The real thing is here, and it appears to have equal width and a kind of a sharp top and sit at a constant altitude above the actual lunar surface itself. Let's go closer. Here it is magnified. It even has color. The base of it is reddish. The top of it is bluish. That sounds interesting. And this is the command module and service module. These are the antennas for relaying data from Apollo back to Earth. Here's the big SPS rocket engine from the Apollo service module. Moving on. If you look at one of the wider angle pictures taken by Apollo, all along the edge of the moon, taken by a spacecraft within a few hundred miles of the moon, unlike the Earth orbiting spy satellites of decades earlier, you see this remarkable, hazy, bluish something. Now, you'd normally look at that and say, oh, that's your moon's atmosphere. Problem, everybody, the moon has no atmosphere. We know this from Earth occultations. We know this from satellite imagery. We know this from instruments placed during Apollo on the moon itself. There is no atmosphere. So what in the world is this exquisite, uniform, more or less, band around the limb of the moon? Here's a close-up. This is from Apollo 17 on the far side. This is a grid structure. Look at this incredible, precise set of grids. It's ancient, it's eroded, it's moth-eaten. It has the consistency of, wait for it, cigarette smoke, meaning the spacecraft can go through it and survive, because it's like walking through a smoke-filled room at 1.5, 2 miles per second. They don't even notice it. But if you zoom in, like here, you can see now a very eroded, three-dimensional honeycomb grid structure, shining blue because of the scattering of sunlight in glass is blue. This is a glass grid, a dome-like manufactured set of structures above the lunar surface that obviously should not be there.
5.
Here's a photo from Apollo 16, far side of the moon. Under certain lighting conditions, this stuff scatters light and refracts it in certain geometric directions. It's all down here in the front. Again, look at these pictures in detail later. And at the certain angles from the Earth, the light is magnified like a lens toward the camera in the Apollo 16 command module on the lunar far side. Here's a close-up. This is impossible. Look at the scattering in the glass around the Earth. And yet here and here, you see nothing because there's no light. Here it's being refracted like a lens toward the camera, and that's why it's visible. And again, all we've done is to magnify, in terms of brightness and contrast, these images that are official NASA images. Here's an image on the surface from Surveyor 3. After sunset, when the light is supposed to be cut off by the lunar hills, instead there's brilliant beads of light along the horizon, and there's a geometric structure rising above the horizon. NASA said this is the solar corona, but the solar corona does not have rectilinear, moth-eaten geometry. Here's a photograph that came from my friend Ken Johnston, preserved for 30 years apart from NASA. This is the normal NASA view. This is Ken's view, slightly enhanced. And look at this incredible geometric grid in close-up extending above the lunar surface. In other words, we have different spacecraft, different missions. This is Apollo 15. up in the lunar Apennines. Look now at the color of this grid with the sun behind you. It's behaving like a sunset or a sunrise on Earth. Here's a view now from Apollo 17. This is the normal view. This is when it's just brightened. Look at all this incredible glass in the sky, geometric glass. Here's now from Apollo 17 looking east with the sun. I'm sorry, looking west with the sun in the east. It's colored. It looks, in fact, exactly like a sunset in the atmosphere on Earth from refractive color, prismatic color. This is the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco. This is the moon, the Apollo 17 landing site. There has to be something in the sky to be bouncing the light back to the camera. Here's the photographer, one of the astronauts. Here's the lunar module. This is North Massive. This is something NASA has absolutely never, ever, ever, nor will they ever until they're forced to discuss. This is now a painting by Alan Bean. Remember, he was the lunar module pilot on Apollo 12. This is what he thinks in his imagination he remembers of the moon. An astronaut in a brilliant white spacesuit with all kinds of beautiful prismatic colors, which are obviously coming from the glass. This is a geometric close-up of Ken Johnston's image, magnified. Look at this astonishing geometry. This is now what it looks like in close-up: slanted buttresses, geometry, grid lines, rebar, all made of glass, sparkling in the sunlight. And these are comparisons of Apollo 14 with Apollo 12. This was Alan Bean's mission. There's the Intrepid lunar module, and behind it are these layers of glass. This is on a piece of film called Pinpoint for a Lunar Landing, which was distributed by NASA to libraries all over the world. All you have to do is go to a library, borrow this film, Pinpoint for a Lunar Landing, put it in your scanner, take a look at a few of the frames, and you'll see this on official NASA data that was sent all over the world. They can never call it back. They can't censor it, and you can find it. Now we leap forward 40 plus years. This is now the Chinese lunar mission Chang 3 in 2013. Here's the little robot, Jade Rabbit. Chang 3 means, the goddess of the moon. This is from the official Chinese Army website. Look at the glass. Look at the vertical striations. Look at the horizontal striations. This is independent confirmation. Now it's comparing to Apollo. This is 14. This is 15. Apollo 16, 17. Two different political systems, two different sets of spacecraft, two totally different cameras, five different landing sites, all showing the same thing. Here's Jade Rabbit's view of Chang 3, the lander. And again, you see the prismatic glass. I mean, this is stunning. This is absolutely mind-boggling that it's sitting there and nobody officially this is a close-up. Look at the prisms. Look at the glass refracting sunlight in brilliant, brilliant color in broad daylight on the moon. Again, comparison of Chang 3 with Apollo 17. Finally, if you look closely, this is an Apollo 16 picture. At some points when they took the pictures, when the Apollo astronauts were walking around and they went to different angles, the glass would actually produce a rainbow prism of dispersive color. We'll go closer. Here's a prism in the sky on the moon of the glass sitting in the grid. This is a resume mark on the film. There's no doubt in my mind that this is artificial. This is confirmation from the ground, which brings up the question, what did the people at the CIA know when they called this first spy satellite program Project Corona? Is it possible that the corona is named literally after the corona of glass around the surface of the moon, which you can see during any total solar eclipse from the Earth, except everybody for hundreds of years has thought that it's just the corona of the sun? No, it's the glass of the moon. And when you magnify it with a telescope, you see incredible geometric distortions caused by the regular buttressing of this ancient glass dome that I believe covered the entire moon. And doesn't this look incredibly like, this is taken by an amateur in Europe in 1999 during the total solar eclipse there. This is Project Gambit, part of Project Corona. This is the film that President Kennedy would have seen to launch Project Apollo, to basically make public alien ancient ruins on the moon. And I think that's why he was killed. Well, again, in the model that we are not the first and that they weren't the first, we're looking at a successive series of civilizations. Can you imagine growing up surrounded by this incredibly ancient, incredibly important history that formed you and the solar system and everything you know and love? And you don't try to figure it out, and you don't put markers for tourists to follow? That goes back to Keith's thing on the edge of the cliff, which I definitely think is a Parker marker, as I used to say.
Andrew A. Curry began his artistic career as a community public artist, working with neighborhood groups to create murals in schools and community centers. As a graphic designer and illustrator, he serviced small to large Canadian companies. For the past decade, he has worked as a storyboard artist and concept illustrator in film and television and in commercial advertising. Andrew has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of British Columbia, a diploma in graphic design and illustration, and a master's in art therapy.
So, as I mentioned, we had some late snowfalls here in North Vancouver. And so in the lower right-hand image of my sort of quad here is an image, and I enhanced it a bit. I just bumped the contrast up, is snow melting on one of the roofs across the street. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, there's a real, you're seeing the tiles underneath, or the shingles, I mean. And there's like a gridding, again, rectilinear geometric pattern that emerges because it's the shingles as it melts. And I thought, wow, that reminds me of the stuff I was seeing on the moon. I actually called this image the rooftops of the moon, just because it reminded me of that. This rectangle is here on this side. And you can see this waffling kind of pattern. And again, it's something that you see a lot on moon images. And then down here, I enhanced it so you see it even more. And then on my next slide, so up here, you can really see that crisscross pattern. Then what I did is I again laid it down beside what the roof lines look like, and then used it like as an analogy. And I mean, that's what I do. I'm an artist first and foremost, and my job is to pattern recognize. I'm a pattern recognition person, and this is the kind of thing I do constantly. Since I was really tiny, I was always drawing, and that's all I remember doing. And so for me, finding the sort of signal in the noise, some sort of pattern, some geometry, or some kind of something that stands out from the background is something that I think I'm fairly good at. Now we jump over to Pluto. And the reason why I'm going around a bit is because I've presented some of these images in shows in the past on the other side of midnight. And it sort of follows what Richard has said on air, and that is what we're sort of seeing with our space probes throughout our solar system is this progression through what we've called the celestial stations of the cross. And so Pluto is one of those sort of special areas. So this is from Pluto New Horizons mission. It was it was a NASA probe. This is images from 2015, and this little area down here is called Sputnik Planum. And what I did is I rotated it slightly left. And then what I did is I looked at these two areas here. And if you look at this whole area, it's actually incredible. But just for sake of argument, this is what I did. So the top images are from Pluto, and the bottom images are bombed out cities in Berlin at the end of the Second World War.
My God, look at that.
Yeah. And what I wanted to do is show you just again the sort of the rectilinear lines that Richard reviewed at the beginning, that Bob went through, and everybody went through. And we have to understand that the images on the bottom they're buildings. The images at the top are giant, what we think are giant archeologies. Now NASA calls it ice mountains. Yeah. But what I wanted to show you is how internally, if you look above, it's just so similar. So if I take my little green thing, let me just go around, let's say this one. You see all the right angles. You come down here on a building in Nuremberg, it's all bombed out again. So again, another analogy. I like using a lot of Earth comparisons because I believe that what we're seeing in our solar system are familiar things. And they may be of gargantuan size and enormous scale, but they're familiar. This one I enjoyed because it almost looks like, again, right angles.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they look like giant sort of walls.
And the analog is right below it. Perfect analog.
Yeah, Berlin. And then the one up here is another area, Sputnik Planum. And what I saw here was these girder-like lines.
The girders.
Yep.
I bet a guy once in Wisconsin at the university that we would find the girders and that he owed me a dinner.
Uh-huh.
He hasn't paid yet. He's a very well-known theological scientist and he hasn't paid yet.
Interesting. And look at this one, you guys. Look at this one right here. Look at this perfect. I can make my little green guy move. Look at this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll move to the next slide. All right. So this is from the ESA Rosetta mission. So it's the European Space Agency's Rosetta mission. And this is an image of 67P, what they're calling Comet 67P. And we think, and this is really interesting. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to go a little further afield is to sort of whet everybody's appetite for hopefully further imaging workshops like this, where we're going to go further and look at these kinds of objects. But there has been so many more of these, Richard, of these sort of double-lobed, peanut-shaped, supposedly slow-fusing comets that somehow, in the beginning of our solar system, somehow gently came together, and there's like many of them. I wanted to show you this overall view, and then I wanted to go to this because it was a shot within. All right. So this is from the OSIRIS Image of the Day archive. That's the camera, the OSIRIS camera. This was from August the 8th, 2006.
By the way, isn't that cute? An OSIRIS camera?
Yeah, I know. I want you guys to look at this. I call this image the foundation. So speaking of what
look at that. Wow. Andrew, that's wonderful.
Yeah. You can follow.
You're looking at an oblique view. It's like a 45-degree angle, slant range.
And you can go through all this. Look at this beautiful form here.
It's a square.
Yep.
With stuff in the middle.
The walls. Yeah, it looks like the Berlin. Looks like that Berlin.
Yeah.
It's shattered ruins.
Yeah. And they actually took another picture of the same area, so you can tell from a slightly different lighting. But I want you guys to look at this little area here. And I brought it into here, and I measured it out with the pixels. And this thing.
Oh my God, Andrew, what a gem.
Yeah. And it's about 6 feet. Wait, I figured just from counting the pixels, it's six by 6. And then I looked at Earth comparisons at concrete support beams.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I like analogies. I'm not saying that's what it is. Just as we've all been saying.
Hang on. A shark and a dolphin look so similar because form follows function, water lining, streamlining, hydrodynamics. So whether you build on Mars, you build on 67P, or you build in Saudi Arabia, a building is a building is a building because gravity and tensile strength and materials are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on from here, I'm going to just come out of here. And we're going to go over to Mars. We'll finish on Mars. So this is, again, NASA Curiosity's images. And this is Sol 1384. And again, I know a lot of people see a lot of things in these hills or these mounds, but right here, we come over and I enhanced it a bit. And then I brought it in closer. And this is a very interesting rock. Look at this.
He said tongue in cheek.
Yeah. And what I do as an artist, and Cynthia does this, and folks, we see this all the time in archaeology, where the archaeologists will do little sketches of some sort of engraving found on some rock wall in Saudi Arabia of like camels that barely look like camels with all kinds of gear and saddles that don't really look like deers, but they could be.
And then the New York Times prints them up as a full-page picture. Look at what they found, and it looks like crud.
Exactly. So this is a tried and true method. And so what I did is I just did a little rendering at the bottom, just kind of clearing it a little bit, making it a bit more clear. And I don't know what that is, but it certainly doesn't look like mineral rising up from the ground to me. And so this is part of our sort of Mars junk. And I know I'm getting...
It looks like a mechanical thingy.
Yeah. Another thing that I do is I'll look for, and I know we all do this, but I'll look for materials that are like a different color. And this one stuck out to me. So lying here on yet another Curiosity image was this thing. And I thought, that's very curious. And at first, this is where we got into some arguments because Cynthia says, I don't see it. This is when we first also met each other.
Yeah.
But I enhanced it, and I started to see this sort of strange... Go to the next slide. What looked to me that it could be something. So what I did is I went from here and I drew it, and then I righted it, and then I gave it another side. And then I looked at Earth comparisons. This one happens to be from Angkor Thom from Cambodia, very ancient site. Could be, who knows? But there is definitely something interesting there, and it's a very peculiar looking rock.
Can you go back 2 slides?
Yeah.
Okay, look on the far right where your laser is.
That place.
That object. Look at that.
That's an impossible object.
It's a piece of machinery, and I think I know what it is. And if I tell everybody, well, I'll save it to our speculation, at the end point. But again, this is all laid out. Anybody listening, you can do this.
Yes.
It's all in NASA's files. You just have to want to do it and have patience to learn how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to move forward to the last image. Yeah, there we go. This is one of the...
I love this one. I love this one. Oh, what a find.
Yeah. I first saw this on one of Keith's Gigapans. And again, we only have one angle for it. Well, at least as far as we know. So, the light is catching it in a certain way, but it just, again, stood out for me in the landscape. And I actually, in my chapter for our book, which is just going to be coming out this year, if you guys read my section, I have a perfect analogy again, something that I found in my own neighborhood, and that's all I'm going to tease. But when I enhanced this down here in the corner, I thought, wow, this looks like something familiar. And then,
oh my.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So on the left is Michelangelo's Moses. And the proper way to see it is him looking right to left, or the sculpture. And I reversed it here, and I laid it beside this very strange-looking something. And again, I mean, this is interesting because it has a corresponding side. This is an interesting feature here. This is interesting, and then we have this. And what's interesting is Cynthia asked me, what's with the horns? And nobody's really sure, but one of the things I read about was that it perhaps has something to do with a continuous kingship to pre-diluvian kings. Now, where that flood, I mean, I assume these writers meant the myth, they say a myth of a flood here on Earth, but are we possibly talking about the flood that happened on Mars? Because we know it happened. And what do these horns represent? Well, we had a really interesting discussion. I brought one day an image to everybody showing, I don't know if everybody remembers that 1960s TV series called My Favorite Martian.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, and the Martian had these two antennas that would come out of his head, and that's how he would And are we sort of seeing that these horns are almost like a connection to the field, the torsion field?
Well, let me give you some solid data. I love data. If you read the Sumerian text, if you read actually Sitchin and his translation and his graphics, some of his translations are kind of iffy, but his original sources for the cuneiform tablets, the gods were depicted with horns.
Yeah.
Because the horns were antenna connected to the field, connected to the Godhead. So these horns, I think, on Moses signify his connection to God, the communication between him and the Godhead. And what's it? I forget the actor who played My Favorite Martian. It's so in line with this idea. His antenna were connected to the field.
Yeah.
Ray Walston.
Ray Ralston, yes, thank you.
And just another aside, we also talked about the power of human hair. And Cynthia had,
yes.
I mean, the legend of Samson and when he, yeah, exactly, the power that he was.
Where I picked up on that was I was reading some stuff by James DeMayo on Wilhelm Reich and the Orgone field, and his research indicates that hair actually is a very sensitive antennae for the field.
Yeah.
And in World War II, the Indian scouts, the Native American Indian scouts that were serving in the military, got to keep their long hair because they said that when it was cut, they were not as efficient as scouts. That
Bingo.
They needed the long hair to be sensitive. The hair stands up on your back, that kind of thing.
Yep. It all hangs together.
Yeah. I want to share something. I'm going to go back a slide, and I'm going to go forward too, because I want to bring up something that Richard brought up with us, and he's now openly talking about in the public forum. So we have an ancient site, we believe. It's tattered, it's worn down. I mean, even here you can almost see what looks like could be ancient masonry. Could be. But something that we humans do, and it's something Cynthia brought up, is that we tend to go and work on old places and recarve and so what we might be looking at is succeeding civilizations. Tim, you grew up near. Can you explain this area a little bit?
Well, I grew up around 3 hours away from there, but I did live in Devon on the edge of Cornwall. My ancestors come from Cornwall as well. But you're looking at Tintagel. Okay. I have a feeling my family came from that. On my father's side, actually came from that village.
But this is essentially what is known as a castle in Cornwall, England. And the people who are basically running it now, the landlords of it, they have decided to allow, I don't know if it's more than one sculptor, but at least this fellow, Peter Graham, to start carving these faces. And the traditionalists in the area and in England are really upset about this. They're calling it a defacing because they say it's just a big money grab to get people to come in, more tourists. But my whole point with showing this was that
I think it's much deeper, Andrew. Come on, look at the timing.
Absolutely. And it's what we do. It's what we go and start just adding more into old sites. And that's so. There it is. I mean, we have all of these parallels with Earth and with Mars and throughout our solar system. There's so much familiarity and there's so much geometry. The conclusion starts to become more and more clear. And yeah, that's where I wanted to end my my presentation. So thank you, everybody.
What is that in the upper right-hand corner with the teeth in the mouth? It looks like a gorilla or something.
Yeah, I see it.
Or a
too.
demon.
You mean this?
This guy.
Yeah.
Yep, that's him.
I know, I noticed that too. And
That was
again,
the face that was already there.
yeah, exactly, Keith. I was thinking the same thing. And yet we come in and carve, or we recarve.
Well, wait. Did Peter, the artist, what's his name, Peter Graham, did he choose his location because of that guy?
Yeah, you wonder.
You know, just
We can
down the
ask
road
him.
from where this is, there's a place called The Lizard.
Say that again?
There's a place just down the road called The Lizard.
Oh my.
The lizard?
Yeah, and I think there's a series of domes there, which is early warning radar, I think it is, or that's what they say it is. But it's like a sort of military base which is looking for long-range radar, whether it's on the sea or in the air. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's further afield. But
This is astonishing. Guys, let me interrupt, please. This is English heritage, which is the squeaky clean, super conservative. You cannot step over the line and go and measure in the middle of Stonehenge, Mr. Hoagland. We will not allow it. Allowing this guy to come in and just sculpt? No way. This is ritual. This is deep, deep ritual, because they know it's about to be born. It's about to come out.
And they're doing more, Richard. They're going to be carving more. They're already doing more, apparently, and they're really upset about it, some folks. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
The Morgan curve is unequivocal. It's there. You can't get mathematics out of a stone.
Keith Morgan, website, themorgancurve.com. In 1982, Keith Morgan began working at ABC News in Washington, D.C. as an electronics technician. During his time there, he also worked with Ted Koppel on Nightline. He has a BA in communications from Harvard University with a minor in computer science. He helped build Howard University's TV station WHMM, now WHUT. He worked at WRC Channel 4 in Washington in 1980. Keith is the discoverer of what has been coined the Morgan Curve on Mars. He has researched the Mars anomalies since 1988 after purchasing the Monuments of Mars by Richard C. Hoagland. Keith was instrumental in getting a face-to-face between Richard and Ted Koppel. Keith frequently supplied Koppel's shows with information which was used in various shows about Mars and Europa, based on 6,000-plus-year-old Sumerian writings. Keith thinks he now knows why the face is on Mars and who is buried within.
This is the face. Everybody has recognized the face. This is the fort. These are the names that were given to him by Richard C. Hoagland. The fort has a set of triangular walls on it, which nature doesn't do that kind of stuff. This is the D&M pyramid, which you saw earlier. And this is a close-up. There's a pyramid in China in the Forbidden Zone. It's about the same size. And the pyramid points due north. The city square has 4 mounds that are arranged in a octagonal arrayed way. It's sort of like looking at the number 4 on dice. This is a close-up of it. This mound here, if you look at it very carefully, you'll see it has a triangular set of walls on it. Now, I reoriented this from my original thing so that it's pointing in the correct direction. So this mound over here is this guy over here. And then this little guy here is the guy there. This is actually sort of 180 degrees out from the fort's walls, but it has the exact same dimensions in terms of the angles as the big guy. It doesn't look very well here because I kind of had to adjust the picture, but trust me, it does. Then this is what I discovered by accident. I took this picture and I put it in a copy machine because in 1988, we had a camera crew assigned to go to Goddard Space Flight Center, where Richard Hoagland, Earl Torn, and Dr. Mark Carlotto were speaking about the structures on Mars. And Dr. Carlotto, who works for TAS, he had created 3D shape from shading of the face and a whole bunch of other objects. And he created this picture because working with Landsat satellites, he has algorithms to correct these images. If you take the NASA raw image, the raw image is not orthographically corrected. What I mean by orthorectification is when you take a picture that high up with the curvature of the planet and the curvature of the lens, the geometry is distorted and the distances don't work. But what Dr. Carlotto did was he got data from a guy named Mert Davies at Rand Corporation, and he was able to plug it into his algorithms and flatten out the raw data image so everything is spaced correctly and proportions are exactly the way they're supposed to be. Without orthorectification, everything I'm about to show you will not work on the NASA raw photo, period. Okay? So when I put this in a copy machine, because I was mad, I wanted to tell the president, vice president, and head of ABC News, Roon Arledge, that, hey, we got duped. NASA sent out a press release announcing a briefing about Mars at the National Press Club, and everybody who was going out to Goddard, including my camera crew, they went down to the National Press Club. But I'm sitting at Goddard in a packed auditorium with scientists and engineers, people standing around the walls, and these guys are talking about all of this. The face did its thing. It got our attention, and now we're looking at the whole area. So this thing went from multiple gray to black and white. So everything gray went black, and everything that's jutting light out stood out like gangbusters. Now, if you've ever taken a bicycle reflector and looked in it with a magnifying glass, you'll see a bunch of little pyramids. Why are there pyramids in a bicycle reflector? Because that angle, regardless of the angle that the light hits that pyramid, it shoots it back up the apex. So all of these structures, pyramidal structures, are jutting out so much light, but in this multiple gray photo, they kind of blend in and you really don't notice them. But when that copy came out, I noticed this set of 6 mounds, and if I played connect the dots, they end up making a perfect curve. Then I noticed that if I measured the distance between them, they were doubling in their spacing as they're going out in the curve. Except for this 5th mound, I could not figure out why it didn't fit. And I was thinking, maybe I'm reading something into this. Maybe it's not what I think it is. But if you skip this 5th mound and went to the 6th mound, the distance between the 3rd and the 4th mound exactly double the distance between the 3rd and the 4th. So the distance between the 3rd and 4th are perfectly doubled between the 4th and the 6th. If you go from the 6th to the 4th, and you continue along that same path with equal distance of the 4th and the 6th, you come to another mound that's in the upper left-hand corner. That mound is exactly the same distance as the 4th and the 6th. This mound looks exactly like this mound, the 3rd mound, because NASA took a high-res shot across this pyramid, which you saw earlier, and you could see the first 3 mounds that made up the curve, but they didn't know what they were looking at, so they put it out, but they're just shooting themselves in the foot. What you're looking at is a PowerPoint presentation, which is a recreation of the animation that I created at ABC with a ABC graphics artist using a Indigo computer with Flint software on it. If you want to see that animation, you can go to YouTube, and if you put in the Morgan curve in YouTube, you'll be able to see the animation with all its splendor, glory. It takes about 15 minutes to go through, and you will see the face and all the things that I'm pointing out in there. Now, There's no music, there's no narration. It's for people who understand mathematics. Okay? Sometimes silence is more powerful than a whole bunch of noise. So when you go there and you look at it, just because you don't hear anything, it's not going to hear anything. This is for people who think. All right. So I used angles when I was working with graphic artists to show that these things are exponentially spaced. So this angle from the fourth mound to the sixth mound back to the third mound, that is actually 19.5 degrees dead center through that mound. But I had the graphic artist move it over a half a degree. So it was actually 20 degrees. But it still fell on the mound because it is an oval. It's more oval shape. It's not a square pyramid. It doesn't have edges to it. It's more oval. But it is 19.5 degrees dead center, and everybody knows what the 19.5 is all about if you're in the 19.5 club, because it shows up again and again throughout the Cydonia complex. And I had to move this ray over to the second mount. That angle is 30 degrees, a difference of 10 degrees. And then I had to move it over to the first mount. That angle is 35 degrees, a difference of 5 degrees. So we've got 5, 10, 20. So I told him, make an angle from the fourth to the third to the sixth. Tell me what it is. And he did exactly that. And it turned out to be 40 degrees. So it's showing 5, 10, 20, 40. They're doubling as you go out in this curve. I couldn't figure out why the fifth mount didn't fit the exponential spacing, but you'll get to that in a minute. I had him swing this ray 45 degrees because I wanted to see what happened. I had no clue what was going to happen. I just said, swing it 45 degrees. And when he swung it 45 degrees, this is what happened. He swung it 45 degrees, and it fell. The end of it fell on that mound. It fell on the mound in the middle. And the mound in the middle is exactly the same distance as the fourth mound. And if you look at this mound, you'll see that there's something that goes out the back and connects to the big pyramid. If you look at this fourth mound, there's something coming out the back connecting to this structure over here, which some have said that it looks like a half a face with the eye, the nose, the mouth, sort of like a tiki hut statue or something. Don't know. I'm not even going there. This ray is exactly the same length as the original ray. It falls dead center on this mound. If you connect these two mounds, you've got a perfect isosceles triangle. If you connect the fourth and this mound, you have a perfect isosceles triangle. The odds are against this being all just natural formations. Earl Torn discovered the X and Y axis. He said he took his graph, he laid it down over the area, and everything fell into place. Not only is the curve there, but the X and Y axis to plot these mounds are plotted in these curves. The fifth mount was part of the Y axis, and it goes straight up to the center of the five-sided pyramid. The X-axis starts at the one at the end of the ray, goes through two other mounds, and out to the tip of the fort. And the curve falls right into place. Earl said it's the logarithmic function of E. And he said he took his graph, laid it down over the area, and everything fell into place. Now, he also said that from the -1 to the 0 mark, that distance measures the distance between all of these major structures perfectly. Richard said, if you don't get it over here, you'll get it over there. Now, these are little mounds, but they're huge. They're like the size of a small shopping center, but they're spaced exponentially. This is one of Keith Laney's gigapics. And what we're seeing here is, this is on Mars. There's a structure here that's represented in here. This is on Earth, And I took this off of Richard's site because the way these reliefs are done, this looks similar. And I don't know if anybody recognizes it, but to me, it looks like a sheep that's in this picture. It looks like it's laying on some kind of cart or something. This structure here looks like it was a wheel or something, and maybe a hole in the middle of it, but it's got some weird shape to it. The shadow of this guy standing up here, you can see it on the ground, and it's almost like it's eroded away or been knocked away or something. And then there's this guy over here. This I've seen in a documentary about the Inca, the Maya, or whatever, but it's a serpent god, and it's got an eye, and it's this, even the segmented helmeted section. That's why I have this guy up here, because I can't find the one that I've seen. If whoever finds it and matches this, it's going to blow everything out of the water. This thing over here, it's got some kind of straight pipe or something sticking out of it, out of the rock. I don't know, but it shouldn't be there. We've got other objects that just don't belong in this area. Anyway, moving on. This is the face taken in 2001, because the European Space Agency took an image that was much better. NASA had to play catch up, but they both put the pictures out upside down and said, see, there's nothing there. But on this side of the face, there's this. And this is an outline. This picture on the right side was drawn by a coworker of mine when she was in art class back in 1979. It's just an abstract of a profile of a man's face. Well, what we're looking at here is a profile of a man's face. Why is there a ridge right there where the ear should be? The eye, if you ever took art, they said if you go around from the eye, you come to the start of the ear. But the ear is a little bit lower, but it doesn't mean that it has to be that whoever this is, that the ear matches. There's the neck that comes down, curvature for where the collarbone would meet. There's the chin that comes down. And as I go forward, now that you see this, you will always see it. And most people will dismiss this. Some people see it immediately, some don't. Now, in Canada, there is this image. And this looks like a Native American. It's called the Badlands Guardian. The Native Americans knew that this was in place. It's the number of details that you have to take into account. The eye, the nose, the mouth, the neck. And on the neck, there is what looks like a neckband with letters or some kind of lettering or something along the band. The shoulder comes out. Coming down the side is what looks like a vest, which curves around under his neck. There's too many details in this. Now, if you go to Google Earth now and go to look at this picture, it's not going to look that way, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. But the biggest thing about this picture is, this image is oriented perfectly north, magnetically north. If you go to Google and you click on the little compass, it will orient us in this fashion, and straight up is north. What are the odds, again, of all of these things being related to something that's supposed to be natural? This is not natural. And you know how big this thing is? It's the size of the face on Mars. 1.5 miles from head to chin, cheek to cheek is what the face is. This is approximately the same size, if not bigger. Who could build something this big and this ancient on 2 different planets? Well, the Anunnaki. If you read the Lost Book of Enki or writings by the Stitchin, the translations of the cuneiform tablets, this is what it looks like when there's vegetation growing and leaves on the trees and so forth. It doesn't look as well as what we saw before, but when you go to Google Earth, you can go back in time and you can see the original photo. You can also see the little brown one when you click on the camera image here in the middle. You click on that and you will see even better detail than the one that I was showing you before. The face on Mars is there because, according to the Lost Book of Enki, dictated by the Anunnaki god Enki to a human scribe, Alalu is buried on Mars. And people go, well, who's Alalu? Everyone knows this name on one scale or the other. I went to the Bible Museum. I heard people talking. My wife came to me and said, hey, they're talking about your guy. And I said, who? What guy? Alalu. I go over to the speakers. I hear people speaking in Arabic or Hebrew or whatever. And they're going, yada, 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 Alalu. Yada, 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 Alalu. Yada, yada, yada. Yada, 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 Alleluia. And I said, well, this is what I've been telling people. Alleluia. Does it mean praise Alalu? Because Alalu was seen as a god, because all of these Anunnaki were seen as gods. That's why it was Elohim, which was the plural of gods at one point in time. And all the tribal cultures had gods, not a singular, because these gods were passing themselves off as gods. And they even built the temples after the flood, which wasn't because it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, for humans to come to there and worship them as gods. Now, I can't say, this is exactly what happened, but I'm probably looking at the closest thing to the truth that was going on back starting 450,000 years. You have to take into account, if I sat here and I flipped a coin, and I flipped it 5 times and it came up heads 5 times, how many more times do I have to flip it to come up heads in a row before somebody goes, let me see that coin? I think it's a 2-headed coin. When you get to 10, 15, maybe 20 times it comes up heads in a row, you got to say something isn't right. Dan Drazen had pointed out that from the center of the city square out to the edge of the fort, that distance doubles to get from the fort out to the teardrop on the face. Then that distance doubles to get from the teardrop on the face out to the cliff. That's exponential spacing again. Now, how can you have it on a large scale and a small scale in the same area? Nature doesn't space things exponentially. They do it Fibonacci in a Fibonacci spiral, but that's not exponentially either. So how do you get 2 exponential spacings on a large scale and on a smaller scale in the same region? What are the odds? You got to go with the odds and say it's impossible. When Dr. Horace Crater saw the Morgan curve back in 1993, when it was a DARPA net, I was at Howard University. I sent the picture to Dr. Horace Crater and I think it was John Anthony West, and to Dr. Stanley McDaniel. And Dr. Stanley McDaniel is the one that coined it the Morgan curve. Dr. Horace Crater calculated it was like 1 in a million chance that these things align this way. If he saw the 45-degree angle, he would know it would be 1 billion to 1. Okay, food for thought. I'm going to release my sharing now, and I hope everybody got something out of what I was talking about.
Thank you, Keith. Really appreciate it.
So we end this presidential briefing as we began, reflecting on the scientifically provable reality of this extraordinary Martian and other solar system extraterrestrial evidence, if not the ultimate meaning of Cydonia to Homo sapiens. In the 40-plus years since Viking took its first provocative image of the face on Mars, this northern Martian desert has called to us across the countless millennia of space and time. Is the face truly a vast, artistic Martian version of what we once physically became? The ancient depiction, by whom, of the advanced genetic fusion of 2 terrestrial species on a reddened Martian plain that hundreds of thousands of years ago ultimately created all of modern humans? Or, as the critics still resolutely claim against all evidence, is this just a gigantic trick of lighting? One thing is sure, the United States must lead humanity in a return to Cydonia, and soon, if only to find out the ultimate answer to perhaps the most important question in the solar system. Are we humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, ultimately derived from a genetic experiment carefully, if inexplicably conceived, on Mars? Recently in Congress, one courageous representative dared to publicly ask NASA this ultimately taboo question. Is it possible, he asked, that there was a civilization on Mars thousands of years ago? NASA, in a public congressional hearing, did not honestly answer the congressman. The deep state apparently will not let them. As President of the United States, the nation's chief executive wields extraordinary power to actually get NASA to answer this most fundamental question and thereby instantly become not just the greatest president in the history of the United States, but the greatest in the world, for simply giving back humanity's too long forgotten ancient birthright to know exactly who we are. Under the Constitution, it is his NASA. With one executive order, the president could have pristine, original versions of the official NASA imagery we painstakingly shown you here, immediately hand-carried to the Oval Office. That same president could then order a team of independent imaging experts and archaeologists selected totally from outside NASA, if not around the world, to exhaustively review this startling original NASA imagery and render to the president, on behalf of all the world, their objective, independent verdict on what's really waiting on the planet Mars for all of humanity to understand. The one means to not only unite a dangerously fractured, dangerously armed world by showing it that ultimately we are all inextricably related, but by opening the new frontier of space to an unprecedented American-led economic boom as we explore and utilize across the solar system the extraordinary ancient Type II technologies awaiting us. A 21st century social, political, and scientific revolution that will, with extraordinary speed, transform, if not literally save, the world. Mr. President, history is waiting.